is protected from political interference.
No government official can dictate what public broadcasters spend their money on once they've received it. So when President Trump says, he puts out an edict in this executive order saying CPB must cease funding NPR and PBS and basically tell any public broadcasters on the local level that receive their funds that they can't send money back to the big networks, that would seem to be in violation of congressional law.
NPR's David Folkenflik reporting. NPR has released a statement saying it'll challenge the president's executive order. NPR says it will vigorously defend its right to provide essential news, information, and life-saving services to the American public. 100 days into Trump's second presidency, many conservatives in the swing state of Wisconsin who voted for him say they're on board with his rapid efforts on immigration and the economy. From member station WUWM in Milwaukee, Mayan Silver has more.
48-year-old Rebecca Smith is a Trump voter from Milwaukee who says the border was like, quote, Swiss cheese under former President Joe Biden. She appreciates Trump's efforts there, even though she says she realizes detentions and deportations upend people's lives.
You could say it seems really cruel, but at the same time, wasn't it really cruel when we had an open border and just let all these people in?
87% of Republicans approve of how the president is handling immigration, according to the latest NPR PBS News Marist poll. That compares to a 44% approval rating for Trump on immigration among voters overall. For NPR News, I'm Ayan Silver in Milwaukee.
On Wall Street, the Dow is up more than 400 points. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. This coming Monday, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, the U.S. Department of Education will restart debt collections for student loan borrowers. Jeannie Williamson is the director of Education Trust Massachusetts, and she says that in total, about 13% of Massachusetts residents, or over 900,000 residents, have some form of federal student loan debt. And from that data she was looking at, the average student loan debt, she says, in Massachusetts is around $35,000. The Chief of Research Communications for the Northeast branch of NOAA Fisheries has left her job. This comes as many questions about the future of staffing and research at NOAA Fisheries Woods Hole Lab continue to go unanswered. Terry Frady, who alerted CAI, our sister station in Woods Hole, to her departure in an email, has worked in communications at NOAA for at least the past 10 years. She did not respond to requests for interview, although in her absence, questions about the agency are being directed to a general communications email. NOAA Fisheries is an office of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which since January has seen at least 20% of its workforce cut by the Trump administration. And in sports, the Red Sox back at friendly Fenway tonight. They host the Twins. The Celtics play game one of their series with the second round of the playoff series with the Knicks on Monday. And the Kentucky Derby is tomorrow. And journalism, a horse named Journalism, is the favorite to win. 65 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Imaginable Futures, celebrating the hard work, commitment, and achievements of the 1 in 5 college students who are parents. More at imaginablefutures.com. This is NPR.
Eastern Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. Thank you. And streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back here Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. And Friday next week, we'll be joined by the governor of the... Is she Friday next week? May 13th.
Friday next week.
May 13th, she's going to be with us.
No. Governor's here May 9th.
Next week. Friday next week. Okay, sorry about that, Jim.
Smooth start yet
May
again for Boston
13th
Public Radio.
is the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell. And at noon today, GBH's CEO, Susan Goldberg, is going to join us to talk about Trump's executive order seeking to end federal funding for NPR and PBS. That would be us. That's why we all have to bet on the horse journalism at the Kentucky Derby this weekend.
If things don't go so well.
Yeah, and hope that,
Can I tell you something? It's not only a stressful day for us, it's stressful living. And we heard this morning, briefly, the Skylark Vocal Ensemble. Can you describe in words the sound of maybe 20 singers?
I mean, these people have phenomenal voices.
They've
been nominated for multiple
gets.
Grammys. They're going to sing Rachmaninoff's Vespers and talk about how music helps you in these
Amen.
difficult times, and these people are going to knock your socks off.
They are. But first, speaking of knocking your socks off, yesterday we spoke with the endlessly inspiring Maria Ressa. We really hope you heard it. If you didn't, you should go back and listen to it. She, of course, is a journalist. She won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021. She stood up to a murderous dictator with her small and mighty news organization in the Philippines, facing down arrests from the state, a deluge of violence from her critics. Her message to us in the moment of attacks on press freedom on the day Trump issued that order Marjorie mentioned to defund PBS and NPR is clear. American democracy now rests with all of us.
It depends on Americans. Actually, I've been really surprised by, the deer in headlights. When I listen to people say, well, we'll wait till the midterms, I was like, how do you know the midterms are even going to happen? This is a lesson we learned in the Philippines. The rights you lose today, you are going to have to claw back with much more than you had if you were to hold the line today. Hold the line was our phrase, because media capture enabled by tech. After media capture, you have academic capture. After academic capture, you have NGO capture. After NGO capture, you have state capture. And if you look at where an executive uses his power for vindictive political, to gain more power, right? That's state capture, right? We've lived through this in the Philippines, and every step of the way as you go up, crumbling the institutions, silence becomes consent.
Silence becomes consent.
Yeah.
877-301-8970. Do you agree that silence becomes consent? Yesterday, lawyers and unionists rallied in Boston for May Day, International Workers' Day, and around the country. But beyond showing up in the streets for a sanctioned protest at a designated time, is it time for more disruptive action? Where are you holding the line in your daily life? And as she said, we'll play this for you again in a few minutes in her brilliant speech in Stockholm when she accepted the Nobel Peace Prize. What are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? Our number is 877-301-8970. We said this after she left the studio yesterday. That was about as inspirational a 25 minutes
we get tons of
that we have
texts
had in the quarter century we've been on the radio.
Well, as we talked about, she endured 10 arrests. She faced 100 years in prison. 100 years.
100 years.
In prison. She had to start wearing a bulletproof vest. She was exposing a lot of what Duterte was doing over there, and exposed war on drugs, which turned out to be people getting murdered in the middle of the night, without due process. We're talking a lot about acting without due process in the United States right now. And she was going after that in his corrupt government, and he came after her big time. And she was originally over there with CNN before she started her very small media group, Rappler, which has survived all of this. But she's got more courage. She put her life on the line. But we're going to talk later about the press under President Donald Trump. And Pam Bondi, who's the Attorney General, is talking about jailing reporters who don't give up sources. So.
Or who are unduly critical, according to her, of the president's policies, which she considers to be, quote, treasonous behavior.
That's right, and I think Maria Ressa is talking about the frog in the
boiling water.
Exactly, that you put the frog in when the water's warm. The frog doesn't realize how hot the water's getting until the frog is boiled to death. And I think we have to be thinking that way now, because people joke and say, oh, well, he doesn't really mean that. That would be Donald Trump. But he does mean a lot of what he says. And I think as a reporter, what he's talking about is extremely scary.
Well, she also painted the parallels. Her book is How to Stand Up to a Dictator. She painted the parallels between Duterte and Trump. And one of the things she talked about in that soundbite there was media capture. And while the prospect of federal defunding of PBS and NPR, it would be horrible news for GBH. I'm sure what Susan Goldberg will tell us at noon, for some of the smaller stations, which are much more reliant on federal funding as a percentage of their total budgets, it'd be the end of any down-the-middle news in hundreds of communities across this country. And that's exactly the kind of thing that dictators do.
A lot of people, it's incredible to think, don't have broadband access. They don't have great internet access. And NPR is where they depend on to get their news, especially like in a disaster, like a hurricane or flood or something like that. 877-301-8970. If you heard Maria Ressa yesterday, what'd you think? What can we do in our own? She's really stuck her neck out. I'm not a courageous person like she is. But what are you doing? What should we be doing? Should we be having more mass protests? We didn't get that many people in Boston.
The line she said yesterday, silence is complicity, is totally true. Everybody can do something. And I couldn't, forget not only silence is complicit, we discussed with Jelani Cobb and her yesterday, capitulation. Forget capitulation. That's another side of the equation. But I think a lot of us congratulate ourselves for not participating in capitulatory, that's probably not even a word, acts. But if you don't say anything, then you are part of the problem here. And if you can't be inspired, we mentioned yesterday, the film about her on Frontline is called 1,000 Cuts. Mm-hmm. And I think 25 minutes of her yesterday was as incredible as it could be. If you want to see, I think it was 90 minutes, whatever it was, about a woman pursuing truth and justice in the face of possible death. By the way, at that time in the Philippines, I assume people know this, as part of his anti-drug crusade, there were dozens of bodies, forget due process, like our president here has forgotten when it comes to deportation, dozens of dead bodies on the streets virtually every single day in the Philippines, yet she decided that she couldn't be silent, as did the 100+ people who worked with her at Rappler. If that can't inspire you, I don't know what can.
Okay, listen to this. We must be loud. I work in supply chain distribution and posted a list of health and beauty companies raising their prices because of the tariffs. My dad joked that I needed to be careful or I might be disappeared. Funny, but it's our reality now. Scary times and we need to fight back. I won't shut up. And then we have another text talking about Maria Ressa, outstanding, so brave and inspiring, and her step-by-step list of the captures. And that's what you just talked about, Jim. Trump is doing what other dictators do. They go after the media. They go after academic, institutions like all these colleges he's going after, and then they go after the
legislature
NGOs.
is totally kowtowed.
Yep.
He's ignoring judicial orders, as we've discussed ad nauseum. That is the playbook. Let's take some calls. Sue and Alston, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Thank you so much for calling in. Hi.
Hi, guys. Oh, my God. This is so appropriate. I'm sorry. I'm driving, and I can't really mute myself.
That's okay.
All right. So I am, every Friday I listen to you as I'm driving out to MCI Shirley, where I teach a poetry class to incarcerated men.
Wow.
Through a degree program at my university.
That's great.
And these guys get it. Nobody understands what's coming and what's happening right now better than the incarcerated. They have lived it. They are living it. And the kinds of deprivations that you're talking about in terms of the education system and ecosystem, all of it, they are living in a way that is profound. I've learned so much from them about what it means to persevere and survive and to fight. These guys have done some heinous things. And here they are getting degrees. They are trying to be better humans. My God, if they can do it, there's nothing that I can change in my life.
Sue, that's pretty inspirational too. Do you mind telling us what university sponsors the program?
Boston College.
Great. Terrific.
Sue, by the way, when you said education, you mean that a lot of these prisoners you talked to did not get an adequate education. That's what you're talking about, I assume?
They never had a shot, Marjorie.
Yeah.
The minute they were born. One of my guys who graduated from the program last year was born a crack baby. He just never had a shot. And his aunt who raised him said to me at the ceremony, Sue, he never had a chance. The streets were going to get him.
Well, I mean, in all fairness, Sue, and I know you agree with this because you said some of them had committed some pretty heinous acts. The issue is not, I don't think, forgiving that. The issue is what do they try to do with their lives from here on out? And I assume working with you and others, they're trying to make something of them, which is to be admired and celebrated. Sue, thanks for the call.
But I do think that she raises a great issue. If you were born poor in the United States of America, or you were in an inner city school, it is really difficult in lots of times to get a good education. And it's sort of a disgrace that here we are in the educational capital of the world, and the Boston schools struggle. You know, they shouldn't be struggling, and they still are.
877-301-8970. Tim, you're in Canton. You're on Boston Public Radio. Thank you much for the call. Hi, Tim.
Hey, guys. Jim, I don't recall exactly what the comment was.
I'm sorry. You're breaking up. Say it one more time, please.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think we need to put Tim on hold.
Tim, we're going to get back to you in 30 seconds. Try to get to a better location. We'll come back to you right after Bill from East Sandwich.
Hi, Bill.
Hey, Bill.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay. Hi, Jim. I am doing Meals on Wheels, and I'm just making a delivery to a great guy who's 95 years old. Boy, oh boy.
Wait a second. Just stop for a second. First caller is going to a prison to deal with incarcerated people around poetry and education, and you're doing a Meals on Wheels thing. That's a hell of a start, Bill. Good for you. What's up?
Well, I'm a Quaker, and I took part in civil disobedience on Inauguration Day. It was really cold outside, and 13 of us got citations and arrested. 2 of us have pleaded not guilty. They're going through the court system. Our court date in Framingham to be arraigned is this Tuesday.
Bill, what did you do? You haven't told us what you did. What was your civil disobedience?
Yeah. Well, 12 of us read grievances during the inauguration. We were outside. And then we basically stepped into the street and blocked traffic. But it was all very peaceful and in cooperation with the Sherborne police.
Okay, up in Sherborne.
By the way, I want you to know, Bill, Marjorie believes in civil disobedience and street blocking unless she has to get somewhere. So just be careful with your... Bill, thank you for your call. We're going to get back to Tim in a second. Ordinarily, I don't read texts from dopes, but I'm going to read this one. Okay. Brian is the texter. Regrettably, Jim and Marjorie, not everybody wants to, quote, do something. Many of Americans like what the occupant is doing. Well, Brian, maybe you should read the newspaper and find out that a declining number of people support anything the president is doing, including his most popular sadistic act, which is deporting people who've done nothing wrong except cross a border without due process.
But Jim, Brian may not know that because
they don't
one
report
of the chief stations that lies, Fox News, has said that the polls are fake. The president has said that the polls are fake.
Or that they were great news, they said on Fox News.
The president has said that he's going to investigate the pollsters for fraud and
you should make clear because you're laughing.
He's serious.
Literally,
he
tweeted, well, he doesn't tweet it. He posted on Truth Social that he wanted an investigation of the pollsters.
And one more thing, one of the most important things, actually we should play this from Maria Racy yesterday. She was talking about the impact of social media, how 97% and then 100% of people in the Philippines, when they started to get in real trouble, were on Facebook, which spreads a lot of lies. Mark Zuckerberg, God help him, has decided he doesn't care about policing any lies. He's just going to let all these lies run on Facebook, unedited or with.
By the way, he did that in the Philippines, which is why she met with him in 2017.
Yes, and of course, all he wanted to know was why.
Only 97% of the people were on Facebook.
But anyway, here's what she said, and I think of that in terms of Brian, because people get so much lying on social media, and even some of these big podcasters that don't know enough to correct the politicians who are doing the lying. Anyway, here she is talking about social media.
It's a little bit like deja vu and PTSD combined, because these are the ways democracy slides, right? It's first technology as an enabler and as an accelerant. I've said this over and over, the 3 things, because the design of social media prioritizes the spread of lies over facts. And if you use fear, anger, and hate without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. The only government that exists without trust is a dictatorship, right? But beyond that, we don't have a shared reality. Democracy happens in a shared reality. We have to listen as much as scream. You can't have journalism. You can't think slow. You cannot have democracy.
That's Maria Ressa yesterday
and,
on our
think
show.
about this. These millions of people in the United States of America, most of them Republicans, who think the election was stolen. The people in Congress who say the election was stolen, even though they know
Attorney
damn
General of the
well
United States.
it wasn't stolen. So we have lies operating big time. And I think what she's talking about is people living in one more or less truthful, because everybody makes mistakes, more or less truthful world, and one that's full of propaganda.
Let's try to get Tim in Canton, see if he has a better connection. Tim, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Jim. Is this better?
Much better, thank you. What's up?
I appreciate the patience. Well, you brought up a great point about we've got to stop with these stage standouts, the organized events, and really, your question was, what are we going to do beyond that? And I think we should all be asking ourselves that. For me personally, that starts this weekend. I got my bullhorn. I'm going to make a sign. I'm going to do a standout. I'm going to have on my best cargo shorts. I'm going to have my Hawaiian shirts. And that's not funny. And I'm going to scream to the cinema lords, praise be Nick Swords, gone too soon. This is an injustice. God bless.
Tim, thanks for fixing your connection there. We appreciate it.
Yeah, they had demonstrations around the country yesterday. Not that big in Boston. I think about 1,000 people.
Yeah, but
and
they did it.
Many more in other places, and a lot of lawyers standing out protesting what is happening at the Justice Department. Anyway, we're talking about what we're going to do about the situation we're in. Assuming you are someone who does not like the situation we're sliding into faster and faster every day. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The number 877-301-8970.
Greece is revamping its railway safety measures. That's in response to a deadly train crash that's come to symbolize government incompetence for many of the country's citizens.
It is a genuine crisis of democracy right now because regardless of political perspective, they have been shocked.
That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday. And Creative Playthings, committed to helping kids develop social skills as they play. Creative Playthings offers custom swing set designs and recommendations to fit any yard space. Learn more at creativeplaythings.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan, Jim Browder, live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Next Friday, when we're here, the governor will join us for an hour from 12 to 1. 13th, the Attorney General will join us for an hour. And at noon today, the head of GBH will join us to react to the executive order yesterday from Donald Trump calling for the defunding, federal defunding of PBS and National Public Radio. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about the inspirational words of Maria Ressa yesterday, the Nobel Prize-winning journalist, Peace Prize-winning journalist, who was with us with a message for our listeners about what standing up to a dictator looks like. We should go back a few years, too. Here's just a little sample of what she had to say when she accepted the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021. Listen to Ressa.
We're at a sliding door moment where we can continue down the path we're on and descend further into fascism. Or we can choose to fight for a better world. To do that, please ask yourself, what are you willing to sacrifice for the truth?
What are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? Our number is 877-301-8970. I guess that's our question today, courtesy of Maria Ressa.
You know, it was incredible listening to her say yesterday, too, that it took Duterte about 6 months before he really did irreparable damage to the rule of law. We now have the president defying the Supreme Court still about Supreme Court
I
said he
think
should
totally
facilitate.
about Abrego Garcia.
That's right. He's defying other court orders in other areas. He's just not doing it, and the courts, I regret, are still not doing anything about it.
Can I totally destroy the mood for about 30
Sure.
seconds? Okay. So what are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? We know the truth, according to Donald Trump, is everything that goes wrong is Joe Biden's fault.
Right.
So responding to that, our friend and brilliant satirist, Andy Borowitz, wrote a piece this morning. Here it is. Donald Trump stirred controversy on Friday by claiming that his son, Eric, was former President Joe Biden's fault. Responding to a reporter's question about Eric, Trump shot back, that was Biden. That wasn't Trump. I took office in January of 20th. That person, Eric, was already around, reached for comment at his home in Delaware. Biden said, I'd rather be blamed for the recession. Our number is 877-301-8970. We're about 10 minutes away from spectacular music. In the interim, Kevin and Sandwich, welcome to the show. Hi. Kevin.
Hi. Good morning. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you for calling.
So I have a question, on funding. Who's providing the funding for known political ads with respect to she comes on and she says that we're going to round up all the illegal aliens. You sign up for this program. And then at the end, it says the great Donald Trump is maintaining our safety.
But I can answer the question because I looked it up because I was interested. And by the way, the ads are playing here in Boston as well as all over the country. Your tax dollars are paying for it. It's paid for by federal funding of the Department of Homeland Security. And you also, I hope you were listening the other day, she tried to run even more vicious ads in Mexico saying, we will hunt you down. And Claudia Sheinbaum, who's the president of Mexico, is busy at work, even though she's apparently a free speaker, trying to shut those down. So the answer is you're paying for them, Kevin.
And you know what we're finding more and more of, in addition to finding out whether or not the people that are in the El Salvador prison belong there based on what they did in the United States or what they did before that, whether they're criminals, in other words, besides coming across the border. What they seem to be doing now is arresting people and detaining people and putting them in detention when they come into ICE offices to do the checkups.
Like the Colombia guy in Vermont.
Yep, or like this father that's came from Brazil. He's been here for 25 years. He's got a construction business, got a wife and family here. He was detained when he went in. The daughter goes to Wentworth. She's a Massachusetts woman, goes to Wentworth.
I didn't know that.
Yep, and he's gone. He's now in that Louisiana detention center. I think, again, people were trying to shut down the border, and Trump's successful at that. Nobody's coming across the border anymore. You can understand why they might not be. I don't think we were planning on getting people that are trying to become United States citizens, doing everything they can, and then sending them to back home to their home country. What are you laughing at?
I'm laughing not at you. I'm sorry to be smiling at you. I'm looking at all the performers who are sort of checking their bags.
Yeah.
There are more performers who you're going to hear in 5 minutes than people who live in Acton.
Okay.
This is a huge
big crowd.
Group of incredibly beautiful performers. Our number is 877-301-8970. We're trying to find out if you were as inspired by Maria Ressa's message yesterday as much as Marjorie and I were. Richard in Boston, you're on Boston Public Radio. Thanks for calling. Hi.
Hi, I sing in the park. That's the gardens here. Mm-hmm. And I resurrected this song called All You Fascists by Woody Guthrie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there you go.
And I rewrote some of the verses to include, I named Trump and Musk. And I sang it in the park. And I was a little worried because I said, well, maybe there's a Trump supporter here that's going to get, nasty with me. But basically, after I sang the song, people actually applauded, which they never do for buskers, And so I was lifted up. I'm going to continue to play this song as much as I can.
I love that. I think, by the way, Richard, I'm sure you know this, but the audience may not. Some of Woody Guthrie's greatest songs were performed. We had Ken Casey on the show a couple of years ago. The Dropkick Murphys did a whole album with some of the great Woody Guthrie songs. Have you heard it, by the way? And some of his.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it's fabulous. They are fabulous. It is fabulous. And Richard, record yourself, send us a little version of this, and we may play it on the air if you'd like. Richard, thank you much for what you're doing, and thanks for your call.
You know, lots of people are telling us that they've set up little protests in their hometowns, too. Someone was, Virginia from Groton, said she did one there. And several people have said that they have gone to lots of demonstrations but do not feel that it is enough. And here's Maria from Littleton. She says, I actually went through the first Philippine Revolution back in 1983, and I would give anything to make sure that our country does not end up where they did. I would be willing to go and fight and even do some jail time.
Speaking of where they end up, let me repeat something we discussed with Ressa. Ressa was here, as was Jelani Cobb and all these others, for this GBH Media Summit, this 2-day deal. And what she mentioned to us is when she did an interview a few days ago for Democracy Now!, right after she'd come back from an international journalism conference, a statistic had been presented that in the most recent elections around the world, 72% of the countries were led by autocrats. And she went to the leader of the conference. You remember this from yesterday?
Yes.
And said, how about the democracy in the United States? And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, the way things are going, it will be gone by the end of summer.
I know.
That's him. That ain't us.
It's May.
Let's go to
Bernadette. 2 more months.
Bernadette in a car. You're next on Boston Public Radio. Hey there.
Hi. Thanks for taking the call.
Thank you.
I work in the landscape business.
Yep.
And I work with a lot of wonderful men who are here paying taxes, working hard, and they're trying to become citizens.
Yep.
They're undocumented. They can't, it's a terrible system. And I have spoken to them about, their rights, your ACLU. That lady is always helpful when I listen. And I am willing to be arrested because if ICE shows up at one of my job sites, I will lose my mind, and they will have to deal with a middle-aged white lady, going nuts. And I'm appalled. I've been appalled for almost a decade now by this guy. None of it surprises me. I happily am still able to be stalked, but I'm not surprised. This has been the plan, and everyone around him is a criminal. So...
Well, Bernadette, people are lucky that you're out there, I should say. We talked, one of the people, again, we talked to yesterday was Jelani Cobb, head of the School of Journalism at Columbia. And remember the controversial comment he discussed with us yesterday that he had made, speaking to international students at Columbia, nobody can protect you. Nobody can guarantee your safety. And it's not because he didn't want to. It's because in normal settings, when someone stands up for others at risk, that other at least has a right to due process in this country. And while the courts have determined, including a stunning decision on the Alien Enemies Act yesterday by a Trump judge, I think in Texas, the Trump administration doesn't give a damn what the courts say, and they surely don't give a damn about a constitutional protection, right to due process. So it's good that people like you are there, and I hope there are many more like you, Bernadette.
And
Thank you.
just one last thing before I leave, hear some fantastic music, that I think a lot of people that text us think, again, that you have no rights if you're in the country illegally. That's wrong.
Glad you said
it. You have a right to free speech like anybody else does, and what the president has done is deported people for their speech. Ironic, since all they talked about when Biden was in office about censoring speech. Well, now they're not censoring speech. They're arresting, detaining, and shipping out of the country or out of the state to these horrible places in Louisiana and Texas, people for what they said.
Well, you've said it 100 times, but since it's local, we should mention the woman from Tufts, Ozturk, who's still in a prison in Louisiana. Her great deportable sin was that she wrote an op-ed that was pro-Palestinian. That's her great offense.
Pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian, what was going on in Gaza, the suffering there. And that's why she's in Louisiana.
In any case, can I tell you, we rarely say this to you the day after the fact, but if you have 30 minutes, and if you don't make 30 minutes, go to gbhnews.org or youtube.com/gbhnews and listen to and watch Maria Ressa. It is as inspiring as 30 minutes can get.
Yeah, and she says, like I said, we only have a couple months here, so we're going to get going.
Fast.
Okay, we are moving on, and we are going to get some wonderful relief from the horror we've been talking about. Live Music Friday is next with the multi-Grammy-nominated Skylark Vocal Ensemble performing Rachmaninoff's Vespers. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, Bill Belichick has always been a man of few words. Now he's a man of even fewer. His girlfriend interrupts a CBS interview, saving him from talking about how the two met. Plus, the Tony nominations are out, and everything's coming up roses for Audra McDonald. And it's the Mellon Foundation to the rescue, announcing emergency funding for the humanities. We take on that and more on The Culture Show's Week in Review, today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Bay State Learning Center, a welcoming alternative to traditional schooling, committed to reimagining education as an adventure, where growth, purpose, and possibility lead the way. More at baystatelearning.org. And Concerts West. Coming to TD Garden on September 17th, Hans Zimmer presents The World of Hans Zimmer, A New Dimension, an orchestral and cinematic experience. Tickets now available. More at worldofhanszimmer.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back here Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, and then Friday we're here as well. The governor will join us for an hour, Maura Healey from 12 to 1. And the following week, on May 13th, Andrea Campbell, the Attorney General, will join us for an hour. It's time for Live Music Friday, this week courtesy of the multiple Grammy-nominated Skylark Vocal Ensemble, a group that's gotten a ton of praise and actually was brought to our attention by our wonderful colleague and friend at WCRB, Brian McCreath. Tonight at 7 p.m. at St. Paul's Parish in Harvard Square, they'll perform a rendition of composer Sergei Rachmaninoff's 1915 masterpiece, The All-Night Vigil. SkylarkEnsemble.org. SkylarkEnsemble.org for info and tickets. And if you missed that, they're also in Greenwich, Connecticut's Christ Church Sunday at 3. Before tonight's show, they're here to perform for us. After we hear the music, we'll talk with artistic director/founder Matthew Gard, singers Fotina Naumenko and Eric Alatorre. But first, here's the Skylark Vocal Ensemble, all, I think, 22 of them, performing the seventh movement from the All-Night Vigil. Welcome to you all.
Whoa.
That was perfect, all of you. Thank you so much. 3 of you are going to join us. Please come on. As I said, those joining us are Skylark's artistic director and founder, Matthew Gard, soprano Fotina Naumenko, and Basso Profondo. How do I do on that? I think well. Eric Alatorre, welcome to all three of you. And on behalf of all your colleagues, that was perfectly beautiful. It's just beautiful. Thank you so much.
So, Matthew, let's start with you. Tell us about how Skylark came to be.
Oh, wow. That was a long time ago. About 13 years ago, this was an experiment, actually. The first concert was just across Copley Square in Old South Church during Hurricane Irene. There were about 4 people in the audience. And the winds were like 40 miles per hour outside. But it was really an experiment to see. I was a college music person, but I didn't have the courage to pursue it immediately. And after being out working in the business world for about 9 years.
Bain, I heard you went to
Bain & Company.
Went to Bain.
Yeah, also like right down here.
That's right, Mitt Romney.
Yeah. We can talk about something else right now. We're talking about music, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So I was a Bain consultant, but I wanted to get back into music, and this was the experiment in 2011. And over the last 13, 14 years, it's become a really amazing reality.
Yeah.
Fotina, have you found in your experience that for there to be a great leader of an ensemble, you should have an MBA like Matthew has? You think? Let's forget it. I'm kidding. Okay, I say this every time a beautiful performing organization is here, and so I'll say it yet again. First person to ever say this to us was Andres Nelson, who's a former regular guest on our show, who's obviously the music director of the BSO. I don't know what the crisis was. It may have been the beginning of COVID or something. He said to us, he says, art matters all the time. It matters even more in times of pain and crisis and fear. And I would argue that most people feel now is a time of all those things. Do you subscribe to his thinking?
I absolutely do. And I find this music to be so healing and such a cry for peace. And I'm so grateful to be performing it with my dear colleagues and friends and sharing it with our audience.
Does that do it for you as well, this notion that it's even more special now than it is in normal times?
Absolutely.
Why?
People need something to hold on to, some vision of hope, some aspiration that things will be better. And so if it doesn't exist in their life at that moment, you can always look at what people are sort of aspiring to, what they're striving for. And art is a great sort of beacon to sort of reach towards.
And we've talked about this too with Andres Nelson, because they play Shostakovich all the time at the BSO, who wrote under very scary circumstances with Stalin breathing down his neck in Russia. But tell us about Rachmaninoff. He left during the Russian Revolution and came to the United States.
That's right. This was a 1915 composition, and within 3 years, he was out of Russia in the U.S. for the rest of his life.
Why?
He fled during the Revolution. This music was actually banned after 1918. The choir that first performed it was disbanded, and Rachmaninoff came to the U.S. and made a whole new career as a concert pianist. And actually wrote op-eds in the New York Times railing against Stalin's violence.
Yeah, and part of the reason I understand that it may have been banned is because it was an anti-World War I piece. It was a piece about peace.
I think there's a thought that this piece, at the time it was written, was a profoundly pacifist statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you went over to get the original. You went to Moscow, Matthew, to get the.
Not in person, but digitally went to Moscow.
Oh, digitally. Oh, I thought you actually went there. I'm disappointed.
No.
Okay, but what were you doing when you looked at digitally? Then I'm sorry you didn't go, but it's okay.
So 6 years ago, I got a copy of the handwritten autograph score. So the 80 pages written in under 2 weeks, 1915, in the composer's own handwriting. And we used that to make our performing edition of the piece. And Fotina and I worked on that, and we're singing from that tonight.
And Fotina, you translated. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I translated the text, and I also notated it in IPA, which is the International Phonetic Alphabet, which is a way of notating sounds that singers use to approach languages that perhaps they've never studied before and never pronounced. So even when the alphabet is different, like it is in Slavonic or Russian, singers have a way to approach the text.
How did you know Slavonic and Russian?
So my family background is half Russian and half Ukrainian.
Oh, okay.
So I was born for this.
Okay.
So, Eric, ordinarily we ask a performer or a leader to introduce all their players, but unfortunately the show is only 3 hours long, so we can't do that today. But who are these people? I mean, who are all of you? Professional performers who sing beautifully, part-time. Who are all these people?
Well, they're top-notch musicians, every last one of them. There's an incredible pool of talent here in Boston, New York, from DC area, from all over. I'm from San Francisco. And it's just a collection of people who have an incredible passion for making music not only for the audience, but also together, that sense of ensemble. I mean, I've worked with a number of groups around the country, but there's a certain atmosphere here, more than a collegiality, almost like a family sense.
How do you bring them all together, Matthew?
It's a big logistical puzzle.
But I mean, how does it even happen? I don't mean logistically, but how are all these people from different places and different lives attracted to this one spot?
Well, we come into the room on Monday morning and start rehearsal, and this week we were performing on Wednesday. So there's a pretty small pool of people in the country who can do that. And they know each other. It's a big extended network, and the word kind of gets out. But we've had a pretty consistent core group of people for the last decade here in Boston, so it's over time slowly grown through word of mouth.
Can you describe the Rachmaninoff connection to your life, by the way, which you wrote a piece about it that is just totally beautiful. What happened to you and your wife and your kid and the whole deal? What was that?
Absolutely. 10 and a half years ago, we were in the hospital for the birth of our son, Harry, who's watching now. Hi, Harry.
Hello, Harry.
Hi, Harry.
And we were in the delivery room, and we had a recording of this piece, the Robert Shaw recording, on a Bose portable speaker. And it was playing when things suddenly became an emergency, and we had to send Carolyn off into the OR to do a C-section, and I was left holding the speaker, playing this piece. And then they brought Harry to me. Afterwards, he had not met Carolyn yet, and this music was still playing. So the first thing that...
Well, you actually had met Carolyn, but he hadn't met Carolyn
well, she was
face
asleep.
to face, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. He had not heard his mother's voice yet outside of the womb, and he heard this piece before he heard that.
That's totally great.
Which is totally wild.
That's great.
You know, Eric, I was reading about your background here, and I know you were in this group Chanticleer for many, many years, but you're also in a bunch of other groups, Seraphic Fire, Leonides, Conspirare, is that how you say it? 13, and then plus Skylark. So I take it that a lot of musicians that are here today are in multiple groups, because if you're just in one group, you're not going to be paying the rent. I would guess that's what's going on. You've got to be in multiple groups.
Absolutely. That's something that when I first was coming up, this opportunity to make a career out of the sort of ensemble singing really wasn't much of an option. And so it's so inspiring now to see my colleagues really going out there, hustling, working a lot harder than I ever did, making a career out of this. And the talent and dedication level that's required for that is really very impressive.
Because the concert tonight at St. Paul's, is this free? Or is there tickets?
There are tickets.
I was going to say, because I would be charging a lot if I were over there at St. Paul's.
Skylarkensemble.org, just to remind people. How much work is that mustache? Can we get to that, please? I mean, everybody's thinking about it, so let's just get right to it. How much work is that?
Nowadays, not so much, but let's just say it was a poor choice in college.
Why is that? What do you mean?
It didn't exactly make me the most desirable for dating at the time.
Okay, that's an honest man there.
So when you talked about earlier, Matthew, people coming in from all over the country on a couple of days' notice. So this is a national group here.
It is a national roster.
Yeah. And tell us about getting nominated for the Grammys. How cool is that?
Oh, it's an incredible privilege.
Yeah.
It's been really fun.
Do you go to the awards?
We've been a couple times. So this year, actually, we had about 12 of us go to LA to be there. And that was really fun to celebrate the work we had done the previous year.
Do they have a red carpet for the Grammys?
They do.
Yeah. Did you get to walk on it?
Yeah. And
What'd you wear?
As well. Oh, just a tux. I'm pretty boring. Yeah.
Okay.
The smile on your face, Fotina, when Marjorie asked this question is huge. What was that like for you?
What'd you wear?
It was amazing. It was really surreal to go there and just celebrate with my colleagues, because we were really proud of our accomplishment. And it really felt like a win just to be there together.
You know, this is particularly for the two performers. Well, you're a performer too, but I mean those who are singing. This is a weird question, so I'll try to articulate this, but when you're performing, do you enjoy it as much as all of us do? I mean, some people say we occasionally do a good interview on the show. Was that great for you? I don't know. I'm not comparing us to you at all, believe me. But sometimes you get so lost in the work that you don't even know whether something was good or not. That was as beautiful gets. Do you feel that when you're doing it?
Yes, I really love the moments when you're in the flow and you're really not thinking, and you kind of wake up after the show and you think, wow, that was awesome.
That's exactly what I was asking. Do you have the same experience?
Oh, yeah. I've had experiences where I've been in a concert where I'm looking at the score and I just dive so deep into it, all of a sudden it's like the score expands to where I can't see anything else.
You just get lost in it.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden when I pull back focus, it's like it's the end of whatever I was doing, and I've been on this incredible journey without even realizing what had happened.
That's great.
So Matthew, tell us a little bit about Rachmaninoff. You're just playing two parts of this whole bigger Vesper thing, but tell us about this Vespers. We know it was written in 1915, middle of World War I, sort of a pacifist kind of thing. But just put it in the perspective of Rachmaninoff's career.
It was one of the two pieces that he said were his favorite things he ever wrote, actually. This and a piece called The Bells. And you might know Rachmaninoff more for his symphonic music or piano concertos. And this actually is a symphonic approach to choral music. And what we're singing today is some of the simpler things, but you just heard a lot of bell tones in that last thing, kind of bells pealing. And in this piece that's roughly an hour long, there are some moments that are extended, orchestrated passages for choir, where the choir becomes like a full stringed orchestra.
With people's voices coming in at all different places, like it were an orchestra.
Exactly.
And was this a religious thing originally for churches, or what's the deal?
Well, so the base material is chant and text from the Orthodox Church, but it was written for the concert hall. It's kind of like, imagine an audience in America now who kind of has an innate understanding of American hymn tunes like Amazing Grace. Imagine a composer creating a symphonic choral piece for the concert hall based on those tunes. That's kind of what this was.
Wow. Yeah, can we get back to your MBA for 1 second before you sing again? We talk a lot about mid-career. You took a pretty bold one. And I think a lot of people who are not ecstatic with what they're doing admire those who have the courage. Was that a scary thing for you, or was it you knew it was the right thing to do and you just did it?
It was really scary. I didn't know what I was doing. I knew how to do a balance sheet. Conducting, not quite so sure. But my wife Carolyn and I both had MBAs and both doing consulting, and we had the advantage of being able to do this together. And so it wasn't just me going on my own.
And what was it like the moment you realized after the fear that you actually nailed it and this was going to work? Was that?
Well, it hasn't happened yet. But I will say that first weekend, we did our first concert, or I guess it was just a recording, in Church of the Redeemer in Chestnut Hill. And I walked out and got in the car afterwards and just burst into tears.
Oh, wow.
Because it had been 9 years since I'd done anything like that, and I wanted to be doing this.
Okay, so what are you going to be performing for us when the three of you return to the sort of stage setting here?
It's the sixth movement. The text that you might know if you're an English speaker is the Ave Maria text. And it's one of the more famous movements that are excerpted from this piece.
Can you three gently put your headphones down and rejoin your fellow performers? Totally beautiful.
We should mention that they're going to be performing the Scarlett Vocal Ensemble tonight at 7 o'clock at St. Paul's Parish in Harvard Square, a rendition of Rachmaninoff's, this piece that they're playing from the 1915 masterpiece, the All-Night Vigil, and we'll give you the rest of the lineup in just a second. But tonight, right here in Cambridge, they're going to be performing at St. Paul's Parish in Harvard Square.
Skylark Vocal Ensemble, yet again.
That was the multiply Grammy-nominated Skylark Vocal Ensemble, a favorite of WCRB's Brian McCreath and a lot of other people. They're going to be performing tonight at 7 o'clock, St. Paul's Parish in Harvard Square, with more of what they just played for us here, Sergei Rachmaninoff's 1915 masterpiece, The All-Night Vigil. Go to skylarkensemble.org for more information and tickets. That's skylarkensemble.org for more info and tickets. If you missed tonight's performance in Harvard Square, they're also going to be in Greenwich, Connecticut's Christ Church Sunday at 3 p.m. But again, skylarkensemble.org to check it out.
Tonight, before you introduce the next segment, anonymous texter says, can you please let me know if this choral group is performing live or are you putting on a recording?
There you go.
This would not be a recording.
It would not be a recording.
As live gets.
That is right. Thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. Coming up after noon news, going to be joined by the CEO of GBH, Susan Goldberg, is going to join us to talk about Trump's executive order attempting to defund NPR and PBS. That, of course, is us here at GBH. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com. The next Great Performances explores how a Latin American folk music icon found fame in the 20th century despite his initial challenges. Watch Now Hear This, Barrios, Chopin of the Guitar. Tonight at 9 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 2, Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. We start the noon hour with GBH President and CEO Susan Goldberg on the White House's executive order yesterday calling for the defunding of PBS and National Public Radio.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then it's Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Young. She spoke recently on her podcast, Say More, for the first time ever publicly about her experience with breast cancer. She's going to talk about that. Afterwards, a spring birding segment, what to look for and listen for, and of course, what Trump's actions on the environment mean for the birds, which is not good. All next, Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The government's latest big jobs report shows a cooling but resilient market against the backdrop of trade wars and government-wide cuts. The Labor Department says the U.S. economy gained 177,000 jobs in April. That's fewer than the downwardly revised 185,000 jobs created the month before. The unemployment rate in April held steady at 4.2%. As we begin to wind down a week of assessments about the first 100 days of Trump 2.0, we're hearing from voters in the blue state of Colorado. Colorado Public Radio's Benta Berkelin reports some Republicans are applauding the aggressive pace of the changes President Trump's ordered so far.
Frank Virginia is a retired small business owner and lives in the foothills west of Denver. The Republican voted for Trump. He's pleased with the administration's immigration crackdown and efforts to cut government spending, and he's okay with the tariffs, despite the turmoil. but he is concerned about the stock market.
But at this point in the process, I'm still comfortable in supporting the president and his policies, hoping that over the next 4-5 months, things will even out.
Virginia says he doesn't want Democrats to be disruptive to Trump's agenda just for the sake of pushing back. For NPR News, I'm Benta Birkeland in Denver.
The White House's national security leadership is going through its first major shakeup of this second Trump presidency as the team prepares for Trump's visit to the Middle East. NPR's Frank Ordonez is monitoring the fallout of National Security Advisor Mike Waltz's exit from the White House, a development that comes weeks after he and others were accused of mishandling highly sensitive information.
The White House is trying to put a good spin on it. President Trump says he's nominating Mike Waltz to serve as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, and that Secretary of State Marco Rubio will serve as interim national security advisor while continuing to do his current job as well. And it's very unusual, I'll say, for one person to hold both major roles, and it's not clearly how it's going to work. And we really don't know who's going to replace Waltz either.
NPR's Frank Ordonez. The International Court of Justice completes a week of hearings today on Israel's conduct in the war in Gaza. More on this from NPR's Hadil Al-Shalchi.
More than 40 countries have been urging the UN's top court to condemn Israel for blocking aid to Palestinians. They say an Israeli law banning the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, known as UNRWA, is a violation of international law. The UN charges that the ban is a violation of the charter, to which Israel is a signatory. The International Court of Justice issues advisory non-binding opinions. There are no penalties to ignoring them. Israel does not abide by the rulings of the court, which it says is biased against Israel. Israel has blocked all aid, including food, from entering Gaza for 2 months, saying it is a tactic to pressure Hamas to release more hostages.
That's Hadil Al-Shalchi. It's NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. President Trump is reiterating his threat to revoke Harvard University's tax-exempt status. Trump re-upped the threat in an early morning post on his social media site, Truth Social. From our higher ed desk, GBH's Kirk Carapezza reports it's the latest escalation in the administration's ongoing clash with colleges.
In his post, Trump says stripping Harvard's tax-exempt status is, quote, what they deserve. Economist Robert Kelchen says the move would carry major consequences for Harvard and higher ed in general.
When an institution loses tax-preferred status, they have to pay income taxes on any income or endowment growth that they have, and also donors have to pay tax on any gifts because they're suddenly not charitable contributions.
If Harvard were to lose its tax-exempt status, it could also be vulnerable to local property taxes, a big chunk of change given its vast real estate holdings. It's possible Cambridge would waive that obligation, but Kelchen says that might put the city at risk of federal retribution. Kirk Carapezza, GBH News, 89.7.
Harvard did not immediately respond to GBH to a request for comment. After more than 150 years with St. Elizabeth's as part of its name, the Brighton, Mass. Hospital now has a new name. From here on out, the hospital will be called Boston Medical Center Brighton. St. E's was for years run by the Archdiocese of Boston and then Steward Healthcare. We're at 66 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. As a fiduciary, Fisher Investments is obligated to act in their client's best interest. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss. This is NPR.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan, thank you very much. We are live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We want to say that we have a programming note here. We're going to be back here next Friday. We're going to be back actually Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. But on Friday, we're going to be joined by Governor Maura Healey, and the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell, is going to join us on May 13th.
Thank you.
Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. Yesterday, as I'm sure you know, Donald Trump signed an executive order aiming to slash federal funding to PBS and NPR as he alleged bias. The order instructs the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the parent, and other federal agencies to, quote, cease federal funding for NPR and PBS, and further requires they work to root out indirect sources of public financing for the news organizations. We're joined now at the BPL desk by Susan Goldberg, President and CEO of GBH. She's here to tell us if we'll have a job on Monday. Susan, it is very good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
There is a lot of concern, needless to say, Susan Goldberg, but tell us what this means for PBS, for NPR, for GBH, for everybody under the big umbrella.
Well, so this order came down at around midnight last night, came out overnight, and really the CPB is contending, and it makes a lot of sense, that he has absolutely no authority to say that the CPB cannot give away this money, because the CPB is not an agency of his administration. The CPB is a private nonprofit corporation that was authorized by Congress in 1967, and it was set up like that to insulate it from politics and from congressional changes. You know, every 2 years everything changes. So it was set up to be separate, and it is not an arm of his administration.
But we collectively may end up having to go to court. I know the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, I believe, is in court over his attempt, Trump's, to dismiss several board members using the same argument. I mean, our side using the same argument that he has no power to do this, right?
That is correct, but I believe the CPB has 5 sitting board members, and they are meeting today to talk about exactly what has just happened. But, you know, this is just one of the fights that is getting waged right now. I believe as you were broadcasting, the administration just submitted its budget. It zeroes out the CPB, which they do actually have the right to do that in the next budget. So that will get fought out, all through the summer. We have been expecting there to be a rescission package put forward, meaning that they were going to try to claw back the 2 years of funding that have already been authorized by Congress that goes to the CPB. And of course, there's the FCC challenge to PBS and NPR.
You know, just to be clear to people without burying them in legalities, virtually every lawyer, we called a lot of people, including Judge Gertner this morning, former federal judge, totally agrees with the arguments being made by the lawyers for our organization. And while the consensus, other than in the administration, is Donald Trump can't do this by executive order, Congress could do anything they wanted to do with these funding. And when the testimony, I can't remember if it was the head of PBS or the head of NPR in front of Marjorie's favorite congressperson, Marjorie Taylor Greene's committee, a month or so ago, made the point that how it's not only funding critical for all of us, but particularly for smaller stations around the country whose residents are totally dependent on NPR or PBS as their primary news source, no?
This is absolutely true. I mean, not everybody in the world has access to broadband. This is broadcast television and broadcast radio that 99% of people in the country can reach, and it is free.
What would happen to us? Obviously, we have many other sources of funding. GBH, what would happen to GBH if Trump was successful here?
There will still be GBH. Of this I can assure you. And we are still going to create the programming that we create now and our fabulous local news operation.
You know, Marjorie and I met with our boss, our newsroom boss, right after all this stuff started recently, and Dan Lothian, we said, so what are we supposed to do? And almost verbatim, he said, exactly what you've always been doing without a change. However, and that was really heartening, I know, for our whole team, we have seen some heretofore really powerful institutions in law, in media, and academia go on bended knee to Trump to try to cut a deal. Is CPB or PBS or NPR of the mind that they should reach out to the Trump administration and see if some, quote, deal can be reached?
I can't speak for any of them, as you well know, but I would just say that certainly based on their public statements, they believe what we believe, which is we've got to keep doing the important work that is essential to our communities. And as you know, here at GBH, not only do we cover local news for the local community, but we create programming that goes all over the country. You know, 5 big national programs that most people don't even realize we produce here in Boston, everything from Frontline to Antiques Roadshow. And it goes all over the country, and we're going to just keep doing that work. I just have to brag for 1 second, if you will let me.
Brag about TV, too.
All right, I'm going to brag like crazy. So we were nominated for 18 Emmys yesterday.
Wow.
10 for Frontline. It's fantastic. 10 for Frontline, an incredibly nationally and internationally important investigative documentary program that also won an Oscar last year. 6 for American Experience, the longest-running history show on television. 1 for Nova, a 50-year-long wonderful science show that so many of the scientists in the world tell you why did they become a scientist? Because they were watching Nova. And 1 for a show we were just trying called Deadlock, which is trying to bring people together from all political viewpoints to figure out how to solve problems. So 18 Emmys, that's fantastic. We were also nominated for 7 local Emmys, and we just also won a Peabody for our work on Masterpiece, which we also produce right here in Boston. So our content, it's needed, it's wanted, it's indispensable, and I couldn't be more proud.
Well, I think that they were mad because we suggested apparently the make-believe clownfish in Finding Nemo would have been better off as a female. That seemed to have put people over the edge.
By the way, that is part of their argument.
Yeah, and we ran a Valentine's feature around queer animals, but that made them crazy. But what do you say? I mean, Republicans prior to Trump have been after NPR and PBS for a long time. They've been complained about it for a long time. It always manages to prevail. But their big complaint is that we are biased and we are intolerant. We are not fair in our reporting. What do you say to those people?
Well, I patently disagree, and I think the audience does too. When you look at who watches our programs, about a third of the people identify themselves as being liberal, about a third say they are independent or somewhere in the middle, and about a third say that they are conservative. And that is true for our major programming, no matter what. I think it's also really important, though, to talk about kids' programming. This fills an incredibly important niche. And what worries me is, while the president may not have the authority to tell the CPB to stop sending out money, he does have the authority to tell the Department of Education to stop sending money to public television. We get millions of dollars from the Department of Education through a special program called Ready to Learn, and it finances the research that goes into our children's programming. So we're not making kids programming to sell sugared cereal, right? We're making kids programming so parents can safely put their children in front of a television, and they can learn to read, they can learn to do math, they can learn to have good social skills. And half of the kids in the country don't go to pre-K.
Speaking of kids thing, I don't know if you happen to be listening this day. We had a guy who was a hardcore Republican, former chair of the Mass Republican Party, who went on to become head of USAID, Andrew Natsios. And a day or two before, he'd been quoted in the New York Times in a story, and this is almost a verbatim quote: "Nothing has done more to defeat Al-Qaeda and forces like that than Sesame Street," which we all know where it all started. And he meant it seriously, and he explained it in the most beautiful way about the message that is conveyed as compared to the other ones.
Well, it's absolutely true. And just yesterday, we premiered a new kids show called Acoustic Rooster, which uses the principles of jazz, of improvisation, of letting other people have a solo, of sort of sharing the stage to help kids not only appreciate the music, but how to get along and get things done. I mean, I wish all adults would watch Acoustic Rooster, too. And it's just coming out.
Obviously, leftist propaganda.
But something you mentioned about not having commercials for Fruit Loops and chocolate chunk cereal and that kind of stuff, that makes a big difference. Because we all remember, those of us who had kids, when your kids were little and they watched commercial television, they saw these commercials, and then the next meeting went to Star Market or Stop and Shop, was this long harangue about Fruit Loops cereals and all these things. They don't see those commercials, or for certain toys you don't want your kids to be lusting after. They don't see those, and that's a big deal when you're trying to bring up children. You don't have a big fat wallet, or you just don't want to store your kitchen with those foods that are very bad for your kids.
Well, that is true, but they also really learn things. I mean, that's where those ready-to-learn grants go, and it's millions of dollars that helped us create Work It Out Wombats, which is a show we've got on now about computational thinking, right? How to solve problems one step at a time. And it also helped us create Molly of Denali, which is focuses on helping kids learn how to read. And it is the only show out there ever featuring an indigenous character as a Native American indigenous character as the main character.
You know, you and other leaders in this operation have, in my opinion, a pretty difficult job, because it's not just legally fending off what are arguably illegal or unconstitutional actions by the administration. This is really stressful for people who who work here and who work in small stations. I mean, we read all these stories with Doge hanging over everybody, even places that weren't shut down, even workers that weren't fired, worried about what the prospects are. What do you think about that? While this all pens, and hopefully this is a successful outcome, what's your responsibility in terms of the stress and anxiety that people feel when you're under the gun?
Well, I think the first thing is to acknowledge it. It is stressful, and it does make people anxious. And look, the media is a complicated business and has been so for decades. But I do think that this is a new level of threat. We've got a free speech threat. We've got a funding threat. We've got an ability to make a living threat. What I always tell people is what I try to do myself, which is to focus on the work, focus on how we can make a difference, focus on making that great children's content, focus on making those important frontline documentaries. Go win 7 more Emmys, GBH News, super proud. So I think we got to focus on doing the thing.
How are the donors reacting to this?
Well, we have seen an uptick in our donations. We recently had a fundraising drive for WCAI, our Cape and Islands station. It was 75% over our goal. So I think people are really noticing. But we have just sent out an email, right before I got on the air here, to our member community, telling them about this, trying to educate people about the threat and telling people what they can do about it.
So that's exactly, since most people haven't seen that, the last thing from me, Susan Goldberg, head of GBH, is what should listeners and viewers who support the work, what should they be doing?
I think you can do a couple things. One is you can reach out to Congress. Congress people, look, our delegation here in Massachusetts is very helpful, but we reach people all over the country, and they want to know what people think. And a lot of these rural and smaller stations are incredibly threatened by this. So tell your congressman or congressperson you don't want this to be canceled. Become a member of GBH. Donate. Help us. And I'd say engage with the programming. What we do is unique in our market, and we reach more than 30 million people a week through all of our programs on all of our platforms. So keep engaging with us and tell us what you think and how we can even be better. I would say those things.
Well, I'm glad that we appear to be fighting back. So, and that I think we've seen in these brief 100 days that capitulating does you no good.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
Maria Ressa, who was here for our amazing GBH Media Summit, and she was on your air too, said something at the Media Summit. She said, courage is contagious. And I think there is really something to that.
So we should show up on Monday. Is that what you're saying?
Please show up on Monday.
Fine, we will. Susan Goldberg, thank you very much. Please stay in touch. Susan
Thank
Goldberg,
you very, very
head
much
of
for joining us. I very much appreciate it. We've been speaking with the CEO of GBH, Susan Goldberg, talking about Trump's attempt to shut down public broadcasting, and we obviously hope he does not succeed. Coming up after a quick break, Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Young is here. She's the host of the Say More podcast, as well as the columnist of the Globe. She's going to tell us about her own story of facing breast cancer. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
President Trump has repeatedly brought up the danger of harmful chemicals, but now his administration is dismantling an agency that spends much of its energy on that work, leaving research lost or abandoned.
We don't have access to any of the data. We don't have access to anything.
I'm Elsa Chang, the cuts to occupational health research on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Native Plant Trust, presenting Garden in the Woods, the hidden jewel of Metro West, a botanic garden showcasing the beauty of native plants. More at nativeplanttrust.org. And Cambridge School of Culinary Arts, offering teen and adult recreational cooking and baking workshops, series, and cooking couples classes for culinary enthusiasts. Proud sponsor of GBH's Morning Edition, weekdays from 6 to 10 on GBH 89.7.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Joined now by Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Leung, host of the Say More podcast and a BPR contributor. Hello there, Shirley Leung. How are you?
Hi. Hey, before we get into it, I just want to say that, I've been a GBH sustainer.
We know that.
After I woke up this morning to the news that Trump is defunding NPR and BPS. Trying to. I doubled my monthly donation. Yes. I know you guys could use a little more money these days.
So we have to go home and do that too.
So I know. I'm hoping more people will do that. I mean, that's one way we can. I mean, we don't have to feel helpless. We can all do something, just like what Maria Ressa was saying.
Oh my God!
We all have it within us to make a difference and to stand up for democracy.
Thank you, Shirley Leung.
Yeah, she was one of the most impressive people I've ever met.
She was.
Anyway, one of the most impressive podcasts I've heard in quite some time is your podcast, your Say More podcast. I mean, you told us years ago when you were facing breast cancer that you were going through this, but you had not written about it or really spoken publicly about it. Tell us about the podcast.
Yeah, so I decided, okay, eight years later, after my diagnosis in 2017 and very successful treatment with early stage breast cancer, it just felt like time to talk about it. And I was able to record a podcast and get my mom in California on the podcast to weigh in as well. And at the time, I thought about writing. I had a column at the Globe, and I thought about writing it, but I got some really good advice. You're about to get a major surgery, a mastectomy. You're about to go through a lot, and it's not the time to go public for you. And little did I know that it actually took me probably 2 years before I stopped thinking about cancer every day and thinking about dying. And even though what's so strange about having cancer, I was 45 years old.
Young children.
My kids were 4 and 6 at the time. And not once did my doctor say, you're going to die, right? But as I say talk about my podcast, breast cancer, I always feared that I would get it because I watched my grandmother die of breast cancer. I was 12 when she passed away. So I'm thinking that my grandmother and I had very similar breast cancer. She was also diagnosed in her 40s. But back then, there was no annual mammograms.
Right.
And so she discovered the lump in her breast, and by that time it had spread. But for me, I found it in an annual mammogram. So women should be getting their annual mammograms. Don't miss them. And basically, I feel like the mammogram saved my life because if you imagine, you're supposed to start your mammograms at 40, right? I couldn't wait to get my mammogram because of my grandmother who passed away from breast cancer. And, I saw her go from this chubby cheek grandmother waste away after chemotherapy and a double mastectomy. And so I was like, I'm going to get my mammogram religiously. And what is so shocking is that just in the span of 1 year, I go from all clear to so much breast cancer. I actually had 2 biopsies in my left breast. And this is the other thing they don't tell you. I had the type of breast cancer where you think you would feel the lumps, right? It's like, oh no, you'll never feel this cancer. You would never feel a lump from this cancer. The only way to really know that you have it is through a mammogram. And so I had so much cancer that they had to take my entire breast.
Hey Shirley, can I respond to something she said a minute ago? When you said you woke up every day and thought about it for 2 years, what'd you think? I mean, what did you think through those 700 days?
I mean, so cancer is, I think it's scarier than others. I mean, because, because a lot of the stories about cancer is about death, right?
And it's coming back.
And that's what you remember. And so, so for me, it was like, I just thought about cancer. My body knows how to make cancer. That's what was so scary. It knows. And so so when it was making breast cancer, it was making cancer, I had no idea. And so can't this happen again? Can't it just come back and I have no idea? And I think that's the fear of once you get cancer at a fairly young age, you fear they will come back. I mean, how many of us know people who beat cancer and it comes back with a vengeance a few
Yes.
years later, and it kills them. And so, I mean, I'm past my 5 years. I've graduated, I'm past 5 years. I don't have that same kind of fear. But now, when I go see the doctor and they're like, let me just do a test, I'm thinking like, oh, did they get it all? Maybe one cancer cell went somewhere and maybe it's back, I mean, I assume I'll get cancer again later in my lifetime, when I'm older, and maybe when the cancer isn't as aggressive, because when you think about the studies, they only study like 30 years out. I mean, they don't really study. They don't know if you're clear forever. I just assume I'll get it again at some point, and hopefully I'll just be very vigilant and looking for any type of sign.
There were a couple of great moments, particularly that I love in the podcast. One of them was you're sitting in the newsroom at the Globe, and the phone rings, and it's your doctor. And at first, what did you think?
I thought, this is really good news. Who gives you a cancer diagnosis over the phone?
Meaning they would never do that.
They would never do that. Never. So I'm sitting in the newsroom at the Globe. I'm on deadline writing about a column about the tea. And
About the tea.
And I hear you have cancer. And when they tell you have cancer, your world literally stops. You actually stop. I have no idea what the person said on the other line afterwards, after she said cancer. It was just like a blur, and your world just stops, and your head spins, and you're just floored.
Were you able to finish the column?
I did. I
knew you were going to say that.
I had to. No choice. Well, I think I was filed. Luckily, I think it was filed.
Okay.
And I was just going through editing.
So that was the moment. That was huge for me too.
Yeah.
The other huge moment is when you call your mother, and so here's a little clip from the podcast as well about with your mother, about the conversation you had with your mother when you told her. Here it is.
Do you remember that day? 我打电话给你 when I gave you a call?
Yeah. It's the morning time. My mom was completely shocked. Yeah, I was shocking, crying. Why? You have cancer. You're your age is very young.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's my age. It's my age has a cancer. It's not your age.
There's more to that. I guess we lost it. Our apologies. What was that like?
You asked your mother if she was scared about your having cancer, and she said, of course she was.
Yeah.
Scared and very sad.
Because it was her mother who died of breast cancer. And so the reason why we called my mom up, because I tell people that people said, was it hard to tell your kids that you had cancer? 4 and 6. I was like, no, they're 4 and 6. They have no idea what cancer is. They have no idea that mommy could die. I think luckily they were oblivious, right? But my mom, I think I waited a while to tell my mom, because she's in California, and I waited maybe 2 weeks before I called her, and she actually had called me for something else. Like, we were planning summer vacation, because I got diagnosed in June, and she was calling me up about planning summer vacation. I said, Mom, I'm sorry, we can't make any plans this summer. I have cancer. And we just started crying. And it was just, it was hard for me to tell her, because I'm a parent, and can you imagine if your child called you and said, I have cancer?
No.
It would crush you.
Yeah.
So that was the hardest conversation I had during this time, and a lot of people thought, a lot of people were surprised by that. It's like, yeah, I mean, I just can't imagine being a parent and having a child who's sick.
So, Shirley Leung, you talked about deciding it wasn't the time. People gave you guidance, it wasn't the time, and you decided the time was now. This is really to say transparent isn't. I don't like telling people where I ate lunch yesterday. I'm serious.
Jim slithers around.
So I may do that.
Secretly.
I may not. I'm serious. How hard is this telling this story now, even now?
I mean, now it's 8 years. I have a lot of distance. I think what was hard for me was that I don't fit that traditional narrative or I don't know if it's stereotype, but the image of a breast cancer or cancer survivor, right? We in our culture right now, I didn't go through chemotherapy, I didn't lose my hair, I didn't go through radiation. It was a fair, as breast cancers go, it was a very treatable, beatable cancer. It was very early stage, caught early. Yes, I had to lose a breast. I went took a pill for 5 years, tamoxifen. So as cancer experiences go, this is the kind you want, right? So I felt like I didn't, as I say in the podcast, I didn't feel like a survivor. I didn't feel like a warrior. I felt lucky, and I think that was my struggle. How do I create space for that kind of cancer patient,
What's common?
You did,
I'm sorry,
you did create space toward the end of this when you talked to this physician that deals a lot
Dr.
with...
Partridge, my oncologist.
Yes,
yes.
And she specializes in younger women having cancer, and they're women that have to decide, well, do I want to risk having children? Because, of course, the hormones in some cases can produce breast cancer. A lot of people get breast cancer when they're pregnant or after they deliver, or, whether they want to do reconstruction and dating.
Right.
At what point in your new dating life do you tell someone that you have had breast cancer?
I mean, Dr. Partridge, who's at Dana-Farber, and I got my treatment at Dana-Farber and the Brigham, and they were wonderful, incredible team. As I like to say, if the Boston is the best place in the world to get sick.
Yeah.
We have so many incredible doctors here. And Dr. Partridge, she was, and I've met so once you have breast cancer, you meet all these other women who also have breast cancer, and often, maybe they've gone through it, they've survived, other people are going through treatment, and it really struck me, the young women with breast cancer, they weren't thinking, and this is what Dr. Partridge was talking about, they're not just thinking about living or just surviving, they're thinking about how can I go on, how can I have a family, I remember talking to a woman who was like, I want to breastfeed. She's not even pregnant, but she's thinking, I want to have treatment so that I will be able to breastfeed,
Yeah.
And she's got like stage 3 breast cancer. She's very young, and she's like, okay, but I want to breastfeed. How can I do that? Because, and when you think about it, it's a message of hope. I'm going to have a future. And so I'm going to have the best I may have cancer right now, but I'm going to make sure I have the option for the best future for me.
So before you tell us what's coming up on the podcast, do you have any kind instructions for well-meaning people about what they shouldn't say to someone when they are told that their friend has cancer?
Well, that's really good. I mean, I've actually heard from people who I heard from someone whose child had cancer and recently passed away, and he was telling me that people don't know what to say.
I didn't know what to say. It's really hard.
And I think just be very authentic and don't apologize and ask. I mean, I guess if you just recognize anybody who has cancer, I heard you are going through something, let me know if there's anything I can do. I think something as simple as that is much appreciated.
She's too kind to tell me. What's coming up on the podcast?
Well, we have... let's see, we're going to have 4 more episodes.
Yeah, sounds great.
And the next one I'm excited about, next 2, but the next one I'll talk about is, do you remember the book, The Emperor of All Maladies? This is by Dr. Siddhartha Mukherjee.
No.
It came out about 15 years ago. It is the seminal book on cancer.
Oh.
He was a doctor here. He trained in Boston. It goes through the history of cancer. And he wrote the book while he was here as a cancer doctor. I think he worked at Dana, MGH, and now he's at Columbia. But I caught up with him in New York, and he talks about how much progress we have made in fighting cancer. Far fewer people die from cancer. Yes, there are more young people getting cancer, but there's so much hope, and so much progress. And he was great because his message from the book is, and it's even more so now, is that cancer does not equal death. And that's yes, some people do die of cancer, but it's not imminent anymore. A lot of us are like me. We survive.
Briefly, though, tell the story about, I think, the 2 doctors in the next episode.
Oh, yes.
This is incredible.
Yes, this was Dr. Barrett Rollins.
Yeah.
He's a cancer doctor at Dana-Farber, and he wrote a memoir. And this was a big story a year or 2 ago. And his wife, Jane, was also an oncologist at Dana-Farber, but she hid her breast cancer for years until it was too late. And he was complicit in helping her hide her cancer. And it's an extraordinary interview because I go after Barrett. I said, Barrett, I was so mad at you reading this book. How could you let your wife not get treated for breast cancer? Because she didn't want to be viewed as a survivor or a warrior. She didn't want that label because she was this incredible, she broke all kinds of barriers as a woman researcher at Dana-Farber in her field, and she just didn't want to be tagged as sick or needing help or weak. And I was so mad at Barrett for Barrett was like, you're not the only one who was mad at me.
So before we move on here, Lori from Ipswich texts, oh my God, what not to say to a cancer patient? Tell them about someone you knew who had cancer but is dead. I can't tell you how many people gave me that kind of a story when I was in treatment for breast cancer. Lori, thank you. That is unbelievable.
I know several people. I don't know them anymore because they're all dead.
Well, that was one thing that was so interesting to me because when we think about cancer, we only remember the people who died.
Yeah.
Because the people who live, they don't tell their stories. They don't want to talk about it. And so that's what I wanted to do, to talk about it.
You did it beautifully so far,
Thank
I'll tell
you.
you. It's just great.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jim. Do you want to move on to your favorite subject now, which is taxes, before Shirley goes?
We have 2 minutes for Shirley
you want to millionaire's tax?
You can apologize to me. Shirley, who knows much more about business and finance than I do, was wrong once. She was of the belief that when the millionaire's tax passed, which only is a surcharge on people making more than $1 million a year, there were stories in the Globe that some accountants to millionaires were saying, oh, everybody's going to leave Massachusetts. They're going to move to New Hampshire, to Florida, whatever. Well, I think there are a couple of studies the last couple of days that suggest that may not be true. Is that correct?
Okay. This study was based on net worth.
Yeah, that's
all right,
true.
Not income. So the difference is that the tax affects people who make $1 million or more. You and I, three of us, we are probably millionaires based on our real estate alone, right?
I think my house. Yeah. It's over $1 million.
Right.
I think
and
over.
So,
or half a house
if you
is $1 million.
read the fine print,
Nice
there's
try,
an extraordinary increase of millionaires because of
how come they're
net worth.
raising more money, like $1.5 billion more than the legislature intended?
That's
that
true.
must mean that a lot of people are staying here and paying taxes, right?
So now the people who have been
Shirley's not making eye contact with me because she knows she's screwed here.
People who've been opponents of the millionaire's tax say that it will take 5 or 6 years before we see the true impact.
How'd you
of the
vote,
millionaire's
by the
tax.
way? I never asked you this. How'd you vote on it?
I think I voted for it.
You did vote for it?
I did for it, yeah.
Okay,
I did vote for
good
it.
enough. Hey, we're out of time, unfortunately. We have a lot more to talk to you about.
Okay, so when does the next podcast drop?
Next Thursday.
The one you just did about your experience and your mother?
It dropped yesterday.
Okay.
So that's live now.
Okay, that's the one about you and your mom.
Yeah.
We got that one, and then we have to wait till next Thursday for part 2.
Yeah, that's
too bad.
That's Dr. Mukherjee and then Dr. Rollins after that.
Yeah.
And then we have 2 more episodes.
Well, so far it's spectacular.
It's absolutely great. I would say radio. Could you call podcasting great radio?
It
Probably
is.
not. Great
Probably.
podcasting.
Podcast radio.
Yeah, but it's
Did
great.
I tell you, by the way, I'm doing a podcast on all the accountants who were wrong about the millionaire's tax. That's going to drop in 5 minutes, and you should probably listen to all of it.
Jim, how come you don't have a podcast?
We do have a podcast.
You do have a podcast.
This is almost not real.
We do have a podcast.
It's called Boston Public Radio.
We have 2 podcasts.
We have 2 podcasts.
But you know what? He doesn't think it counts. You know why?
Why?
Because I'm on it. He just doesn't have one all by himself.
You get the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find it.
That's right.
Spotify,
Jim
Apple.
Browdy, the Bar Mitzvah Days with Harriet Heinemann. What's her name? Harriet Heinemann back there in 7th grade.
Let's move on. Shirley, it's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Young, host of the Say More podcast. And the Say More podcast is where you can hear Shirley's the first installment of a look at cancer, including her own experience with facing breast cancer.
It's really
and it's
something.
great.
It's great.
Okay,
It's
up
great.
next, a conversation with 2 birders and scientists about the spring bird migration season. We're going to play some bird calls as well. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
This week on Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, the first 100 days of President Donald Trump's second term just wrapped up. Which changes has he made that may define his presidency? And what kind of effect has he had in Massachusetts? A full hour of political analysis with the Mass Politics Profs. That's Under the Radar with me, Callie Crossley, Sunday night at 6 here on 89.7 GBH and the GBH app.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates. Elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And M&M Skylights, located in Stoneham, installing and servicing the full range of Velux skylights that can help bring air and more natural light into your home. Skylight consultations can be scheduled at mmskylights.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The governor joins us next Friday here from noon to 1. On the 13th, we just found out not only is the Attorney General joining us, but who else is joining us? And we're
Josh
thrilled.
Kraft.
Josh
He's running
Kraft,
for mayor.
the primary opponent of Mayor Wu. May 13th, Josh will join us. We're thrilled that he has agreed to be here. This time of year, you might be awakened by birds chirping before at least 5:22 a.m. Alarm goes off because it's officially spring migration season. That time of year when birds from all over the world fly north through New England to the delight of professional and amateur birders alike. Our next guests are way beyond the amateur. More than just hobbyists, they view birding as a chance for the public to engage with nature and science, and with threats to science at the federal level, which we've discussed a lot. That engagement is more important than ever. Full disclosure, the last time we did a birding segment was 2 years ago, Marjorie, and let's be honest, it did not go well. Here it is.
The sound of the song sparrow.
Would you two know that too, if
Isn't
we just
that
played
great?
that?
That one actually sounds a little odd, right?
Yeah.
I've never heard an oyster catcher sounding like that, but...
It's a beautiful bird.
Okay, so we may have screwed this whole thing up.
Well, either we screwed it up or they did, so don't be nervous, gentlemen, but your time will come. Joining us now for hopefully some ornithological, is that right, or is that...
Ornithological.
Ornithological. Thank
very
you very
good.
much. Thank you. I'm really glad I read that. Redemption. Mass Audubon's Nathan Center. Nathan's the Burcham Chair of Natural History at Mass Audubon, also an assistant professor at UMass Amherst College of Natural Sciences. Welcome. It's great to have you here. Also here is Evan Dalton. Evan is the Director of Land Bird Conservation. We'll describe that in a minute at Manomet. That's down in Plymouth. Gentlemen, it's great to have you both. Thanks for being here.
Well, before we talk with you about the joys of birding, I guess there's nothing safe from the new administration, the Trump administration, is after the birds. So let's start with you, Nathan. We're the weakened protections under the Trump administration. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, whoops.
Oh.
We need a mic here. Try it again. There you go. You're good.
Yeah, we're seeing sort of a multifaceted sort of attack on conservation and science. So we're seeing pushes to change the Endangered Species Act and to change sort of the definition of what we call take and how that is adjudicated. So right now, if you disturb the habitat of an endangered species, for instance, and that influences their ability to survive or reproduce, that might be considered take. And so there's pushes to change that so that landowners, businesses might be able to sort of alter habitats in ways that they previously weren't able to do.
Okay.
Well, you're also the long-distance migratory bird person in this too. And my understanding is he also has legislation, or at least regulatory changes proposed, that would favor oil and gas companies to the detriment of migratory birds, sort of the back and forth with Biden and him. So that's more bad news, yes?
Yeah, there's, an increased effort to have oil and gas drilling on federal lands and to really change sort of the approval process for those drilling plans. So, as I say, really a multifaceted sort of approach to changing how we view conservation at the regulatory level.
But Evan, a few more depressing things about the birds. I understand that before Trump, things were difficult. And climate change, cats. What is that? Was there difficulties with birds before?
I don't know if Trump has a cat.
No, not his cat.
Yeah.
But we were losing birds before the Trump administration came in with these rules.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we've been noticing for quite some time, and by we, I mean the collective sort of people observing birds, not just ornithologists, but just people who go out and recreationally do it, just over the last several decades, lost quite a few birds. A lot of different things. So a couple of things you mentioned. Certainly cats pose a threat to birds that are outside. Habitat loss. You're dealing with a bunch of changing phenology. So the way that the world is sort of changing its timing as spring comes along. That can certainly impact birds as well.
By the way, the headline that led us to ask that was in the Washington Post, I think yesterday. 75% of North America's bird species are in decline, study says. I mean, that's just stunning. I mean, it's just stunning. And again, we usually want to make sure that when climate is a fault, is part of the problem. It's mentioned, but as you both have said, climate is not the only issue here, which is a horrifying kind of thing. So you both are involved in the preservation and science business and that sort of thing. What are you doing with migratory birds there?
Yeah, what we really try to do is to put tracking devices on them that allow us to follow the movements of individual birds so that we can really see where they go over the course of their lives and then understand the environmental context of those movements. So we try to get on the ground with them, whether they're in southern South America or the Arctic of Canada or Alaska and all the places in between. And that really helps us then to think about how do we go about best conserving them for both the birds and the people.
Nathan, this is probably the dumbest question you've ever been asked, but I'm not going to make eye contact when I ask it. How do they even know when and where? How do they know how to get where they have to get when they migrate?
Oh, man. All right, if you can answer that question, you will become a very famous and potentially rich person.
But you can probably come close, right? I mean, how do they know?
There are really sort of a hierarchy of cues that they seem to be able to make use of. Everything from the rate of change of temperature, saying that, okay, spring is probably coming, to photo period, that's about how much daylight there is. Also, things like wind tell them both that this is a good moment in time to leave, but also sort of the directionality that wind is going helps them on their way to where they're getting to.
And I read something about some kind of bird last night. I can't think of the name, so my apologies. I don't mean to be crass about this. That doesn't touch down for days and days and days and days.
Yeah.
What does it do? Does it sleep?
I think that's your friend.
That is my
that
bird.
True? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
This is the Hudsonian godwit. Is the bird Hudsonian, as in Hudson Bay.
Okay.
Hudsonian godwit. And so it's flying from southern Chile to at least Texas, if not Nebraska or South Dakota.
Wow.
Up to 7 or more days, 6,000, 7,000 miles. And it's flapping the whole time. So there's no soaring, there's no gliding.
Can it sleep when it's flapping?
We don't know.
Well, it has to sleep, doesn't it?
Well, at other times of the year, other bird species
before it leaves, Jim.
are found to take what we call micro naps, like a couple of seconds in duration.
Oh, really?
So they're not doing prolonged sleep. So they seem to be
amazing.
much better adapted than we are to sort of a lack of sleep. But when they do land, the first thing that they often do is sleep.
Is that so? That's
so
great.
there's definitely some effort going into that flight.
So, Evan, what are land birds? Because that's what you're doing, Director of Land Bird Conservation down in Plymouth at Manomet.
Yeah, I mean, land birds are basically sort of, if I'm being very general about the whole thing, just the birds that you're kind of used to seeing in your backyard, right? So things like robins, sparrows, warblers, that kind of thing. But it also, depending on some definitions, can also include things like raptors, so birds of prey.
And you do a banding thing.
Yeah.
And I know that you're going to tell me this is not cruel, and I want you to in a minute. You set up these nets. I think they're described by you as big hair nets.
Yes.
Is the way you, I don't know if capture is the right word, whatever the appropriate verb is.
Yeah.
Tell me why you do that, and tell me that it doesn't hurt or scare the bird.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the banding operation that I oversee has been going for over 50 years now. We're located in southeastern Massachusetts. We've got nets open right now, which is pretty cool. It pains me to take me away from that. But,
our apologies. You'll be back soon.
Happy to be here and telling people about what we do. So basically imagine an 8-foot tall, 40-foot long hairnet that's strung up through the woods. We have 50 of them at our location. We operate them from dawn till about 8 hours after dawn. As birds are flying through the woods, the birds that we study, land birds, typically migrate at night, so they're using stars to navigate, among other things, and leaves them free during the day to
What do you mean?
stock
Hold
up
on.
on food.
They're using stars to navigate?
Yeah, so they can recognize formations of stars, patterns of stars in the night sky.
So they see the Big Dipper and they know where to go?
I'm not sure they identify it as the Big Dipper, but they can say that star in relation to that star and that star.
Wow.
And they can even identify if it's a cloudy night, they can sort of triage and be like, okay, well, I can't see those ones, but I can see those ones. And still
Okay, so it flies into the net, what happens?
It flies in the net, and then one of us comes around, takes it out. So the nets are designed with pockets in them. So I will say that the technology was originally used to catch birds to eat them. So people didn't really care what happened to the birds. But the beautiful thing about it is it's very gentle on them.
Okay. And then you band the damn thing, and then you track it, right? Is that the deal?
So, our technology is pretty analog. So we're like the vinyl records to his MP3. So basically, we just put a tiny little metal band on the right leg of each bird that we capture. And that's basically just giving it a 9-digit number that is identifiable and unique to that bird.
That's great.
Over time, if we're doing it for 50 years, we can see how their populations are doing.
So, Evan, what do the robins and sparrows and warblers do seasonally?
Well, it depends species to species.
Yeah.
But, during the winter, well, actually, I should say every day they're just trying to survive.
Okay.
But this time of year around here, they're not only trying to survive, they're trying to procreate as well.
Okay, but they're not going to Chile or anything like that, the migratory...
No, although I will throw out there, another contender in this long-distance battle here, which is the blackpoll warbler. So for us in the fall, we get a bird that's about, 5-6 inches long, weighs about as much as your lipstick there. Yeah. And basically comes into us from western Alaska. We know this from analyzing isotopes from the birds that we capture. So the birds that we get in the fall, they come to a Boston park near you. I've been teaching students in Dorchester and telling them about blackpoll warblers in the fall, and I had a blackpoll warbler right above their head. So it's been pretty awesome. But that bird will fatten up. It'll double its weight, take off nonstop for up to 3 days, and won't land somewhere. It won't land until it gets somewhere like Venezuela or somewhere in the Caribbean.
Okay, so wait. We need to get some practical advice.
We do.
Here.
About bird baths and bird feeders.
Yeah, well, forget bird feeders for the moment. We'll get to
That's
where do
very
we go?
important.
For new, we had, what was the name of the guy, Vern, that wonderful guy? Vern Lux, was that his name?
I don't remember his last name.
That wonderful bird who
out on the
subsequently
islands.
died. He was just fabulous.
Okay.
And he gave us all these locations. I had never done it. He said, go to Mount Auburn Cemetery. I thought I'd be bored to tears. It was spectacular. So starting with you, where within, let's say, 100 miles is the best place or two for beginners? Starting with you, and then we'll get Nathan in here.
For beginners, I think it's anywhere that your local bird club is leading a bird walk. So I think the best way to get into it is finding someone who knows what they're looking for. Go with a group and you can learn.
You're an Amherst guy, right?
I'm an Amherst guy.
Do you know anything about Eastern Massachusetts?
I knew a little bit.
Okay, so where should we go?
I mean, I'm gonna pitch the Mass Audubon sanctuaries, of course.
Oh, yeah.
You've got Boston Nature Center, you've got Nahant, you've got a whole bunch of awesome places that are not too far away from right here. But the beautiful thing about birds, right, is that they're everywhere.
Yeah.
That's why they are something that everyone can connect with. So just go out in your backyard, see what's there. You'll be amazed.
Well, Evan was talking about how they're struggling to survive. Should we have bird feeders? The rat people tell you shouldn't have bird feeders because the rats will come and eat the bird feed, and then you'll have rats.
Well, let's say that there are some birds that are their populations are really boosted by bird feeding, and there are other birds who aren't really affected. And then actually in some other countries, they're finding bird populations that are negatively affected. So I don't think there's necessarily a conservation sort of goal associated with bird feeding, but if that helps you to enjoy birds, I am all for it. I've got bird feeders. I love waking up in the morning and just watching them. So.
How about bird baths?
Same holds true. So, as Nathan was saying, it's generally speaking, there are opinions on either side, and generally it may be a wash as to whether they offer benefit to the bird. But that said, if you're able to keep them nice and clean, change out the water all the time or change out the feed, it's bringing birds into the yard. You're having a positive experience with them, and they're definitely going to use it. So water is really a good thing for migration in particular.
So we're going to do with you what we did with the last two birders who were totally humiliated, which is we play the sound of a bird.
Oh, can I just say that those vocalizations you had were spot on. Those sounded like a song sparrow and an oyster catcher.
Oh, listen.
Yeah.
There you go.
Now we're going to get some blowback from whoever was here two years ago.
Tough talker until he gets a new one.
I know, right?
Okay. And either of you can yell
this
this out. Let's, people back in Brighton, let's play the first bird on the list, please.
Well, this one's probably in your backyard. more or less.
Enough of that. What is it?
We saw some of them off the bluff at where I work just yesterday. So that's a willet.
Oh, my God. Very good. Wow.
Did they tell you in advance that it was a willet?
No.
Did you know it was a willet?
Oh, yeah.
I did, yes.
I'm sure you did.
So I want to put in one pitch about willet. They are really cool because they were actually extirpated from Massachusetts in the early 20th century, and now they are one of the most abundant breeders in our salt marshes right now. So they are actually a conservation success story.
That is a great story. Let's do the third one, and let's see if these guys are as smart as they think they are. Go ahead. Look at the two of them.
Well, I did hear that one in my backyard this morning, so that's a wood thrush.
I did my master's work on wood thrushes. So yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay. How long was your paper?
Long enough.
That is amazing.
You know, we should stop for a second and ask, how did you get into this?
As a kid, I grew up on southeastern Massachusetts, flipping over rocks and things, looking for reptiles. I went off to school thinking I was going to study reptiles, and then I saw birds, and I always thought birds were obscure. They were always in the trees, and I enjoyed them, but I didn't think you could sort of do hands-on science. But when I saw bird banding,
I was
totally sold.
How about you, Nathan?
Well, I was very lucky in that. My father was also a bird biologist.
Oh,
my
great.
mother's into birding, so I was maybe genetically predetermined.
Oh, okay, so you went out with them when you were little.
Marjorie's not into the contest as much as I am.
All right,
I want
we're
to
ready
stop.
for the next one.
Let's do the last one on the list. Here it is. Go ahead. Look at these guys. Okay, go ahead. What is it? Go ahead.
I think you guys know this one.
Chicken.
I don't know.
Chicken. It's a chicken.
Is it chicken?
Play it again. It was supposed to stump them. It's a chicken.
Now, it really sounds like a Plymouth Barred Rock.
Of course it does.
Okay.
That's what I was going to say.
Let's play one more real bird.
Sure, quickly.
Okay, let's play the actual last one. It would be number 5.
Good. I know that one. That's a chicken.
It's not a chicken.
It actually walks around on the ground like one.
What is it?
So I came in from a flight on Logan Airport. I was actually coming back from a bird trip of all things.
Of course you were.
Was standing just outside the where the pickup zone is. I heard that noise, and I looked around. There's one tree, and there was a migrating ovenbird on the ground.
Ovenbird.
Walking around.
You guys are awesome. Every single one is correct. You got to go on Bird Jeopardy. We've been speaking with Evan Dalton, the Director of Land Bird Conservation at Manomet, and Nathan Center, the Burchard Chair of Natural History at Mass Audubon, and an Assistant Professor of UMass Amherst College of Natural Sciences. Thank you very much for coming in.
Good luck with your work.
Coming up after the 1 o'clock news, our weekly media analysis segment, Press Play with Matt Gertz from Media Matters for America. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
The best way to support your GBH radio listening is by becoming a GBH sustainer. It takes just 2 minutes to enroll and a few dollars a month on your credit card. Small monthly contributions, huge impact. Learn more at gbh.org/sustainer.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Concerts West. Coming to TD Garden on September 17th, Hans Zimmer presents The World of Hans Zimmer, a new dimension, an orchestral and cinematic experience. Tickets now available. More at worldofhanszimmer.com. And GM Roth Design Remodeling. Dreams delivered. With custom kitchens, bathrooms, and additions. Serving New England for over 39 years. Learn more at gmroth.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. It's our Friday media analysis segment, Press Play, with Media Matters for America's senior fellow, Matt Gertz, on CBS's likely capitulation to Trump, Donald Trump's attacks on NPR and PBS, and on the media in general.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then, since someone made us wait a whole day, it's finally time for Am I the A-hole? Who's the bigger jerk? The neighbor who put up those ghastly pink lawn flamingos in their own yard, or the nosy neighbor who wants them gone because they're tacky. Call or text next on the third hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The Trump administration is ending a duty-free exemption on low-value imports from China beginning today. That includes sites like Shein or Temu. NPR's Emily Fang says the move will make those goods much more expensive for U.S. consumers.
There has been pressure since the Biden administration to end what's called the de minimis loophole, meaning packages under $800 were not charged an import fee. More than 1 billion of these packages now come to the U.S. a year, mostly from China, a more than six-fold increase from the last decade. The Trump administration says it's now going to charge customs duties on packages from China in order to combat fentanyl trafficking and to collect revenue for the government. American consumers are now sharing screenshots of the new import cost estimates they're getting on Temu, which in most cases double or even triple the cost of their purchases from China. And trade logistics companies are warning of massive delays in shipping in the coming weeks. Emily Fang, NPR News, Washington.
NPR and PBS say they will challenge President Trump's executive order seeking to cease all federal funding to public media. NPR has released a statement from President and CEO Catherine Maher. She writes the president's order is, quote, an affront to the First Amendment rights of NPR and locally owned and operated stations throughout America, as well as the listeners and donors who support independent news and information. NPR's David Folkenflik reports on what comes next.
It's not clear he has the power to do this. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting has filed a suit in court that's supposed to, move forward next week. It's being heard on an expedited basis by a federal judge in Washington. And we're going to see. It appears right now that the CPB is simply ignoring the president's edict, saying he doesn't have the authority to do this to us. We are not owned by the federal government.
That's NPR's David Folkenflik. President Trump has accused NPR and PBS of left-wing bias. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling a minerals deal with the U.S. historic and expects it'll modernize Ukraine. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports the deal also opens the door to continuing U.S. military support for Ukraine.
The agreement creates a joint investment fund that would raise revenue through the sale of licenses to mine Ukraine's critical minerals as well as other natural resources. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky refused to sign an early draft because he says it would have left Ukrainians deeply in debt. Speaking in his nightly video address, he said negotiations made the deal fairer.
Значно змінилась в процесі підготовки.
This agreement changed, he said. It's now an equal partnership, one that creates opportunities for substantial investment in Ukraine. Zelensky said the deal happened after what he calls a meaningful meeting with President Trump at a Vatican basilica just before Pope Francis's funeral. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
It's NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The Massachusetts State Police Academy is changing its training program following the death of a recruit last September. GBH's Marilyn Scherer has more.
25-year-old Enrique Delgado Garcia died after taking part in a boxing exercise at the academy in New Braintree. His death led to the boxing program suspension, and now state police are breaking up recruit classes so troopers in training get more individual attention and oversight. Attorney Michael Wilcox represents Delgado Garcia's family. He says they're pleased with the reforms.
I don't think it will change our case at all. It certainly won't bring Enrique back. But I think it's important for them to look at what they do and how they do it.
But Wilcox says the family still wants answers on the circumstances behind Delgado Garcia's death. An independent investigation by the Massachusetts Attorney General remains ongoing. Marilyn Scherer, GBH News, 89.7.
In a post on his Truth Social website this morning, President Trump said he's put the wheels in motion to strip Harvard University of its tax-exempt status. The Globe says such a move could have significant implications for Harvard, and while it doesn't have a direct effect on the property taxes that Harvard avoids on its large amount of local properties, it does raise new questions about how state and local officials might react to the plan. Trump's exact words are, "It's what they deserve." In sports, Red Sox back at friendly Fenway tonight. They host the Twins. Celtics playoff game is on Monday against the Knicks. This is round 2, and the Kentucky Derby is tomorrow. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One with the Capital One Saver Card. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
Welcome back to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com. Thank you, /GBH News. And we want to give a little programming note here. We're going to be joined here a week from today by Governor Maura Healey. She's going to be here at the Boston Public Library taking our questions and yours. And then on the 13th of May, the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, will join us also here at the library. Hi, Jim.
And also on the 13th, we just learned about an hour ago.
Oh, that's right.
Josh Kraft, primary opponent of, there are 3 opponents, but the leading opponent among the 3 challenging Mayor Wu, Josh Kraft, will join us here at the library, May 13th. Joined now on Zoom by Matt Gertz. Matt is a senior fellow at Media Matters for America, nonprofit media watchdog group for our weekly media analysis segment, Press Play. Matt Gertz, thanks. Nice to have you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Well, we may as well start with ourselves here, Matt. We just, the president has just issued an executive order, basically hoping to cut off the funding to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which funds NPR and PBS. So what do you think this means?
Well, I would say promises made, promises kept, right? I mean, President Trump was very clear throughout the campaign that he planned to use the presidency for retribution against his perceived enemies, including the press. And I think this is just the latest salvo of what I assume will be many more going forward. It doesn't sound like what he's trying to do is legal, which is not terribly unusual for these efforts. I think that this will probably lead to legal action that may stop this initial effort, but I think the sort of medium-term concern is whether Congress is going to continue to approve funding that would go to public media. I think especially after the congressional hearing that we saw earlier this year, that's a real concern.
Well, I want to talk to you about that. By the way, for those who just tuned in, we're talking to Matt Gertz about the PBS NPR dilemma. But our boss, the head of GBH, joined us at noon to talk about this. And we should be clear, for those who contend, as Matt says, a number of lawyers are saying, most lawyers, that he can't do what he intends to do, Trump by executive action. We should reiterate the discussion, what we said to her, meaning Susan Goldberg. The Congress can do all of the things that Donald Trump wants to do to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The question is, will they? And I know you're not a lobbyist, but that's my question. In light of the fact that we are aware that so many smaller stations around the country depend upon NPR or PBS as virtually their sole news source, I'm optimistic about almost nothing. But it's hard for me to believe that there are not a handful of Republicans in either the House or the Senate are going to say, as scared as I am of going up against Donald Trump, I'm even more nervous about cutting off the primary news source for my constituents. Is that a naive analysis?
I mean, I think that's definitely the best case scenario, right? That the people who represent rural parts of the country that rely on public media for local news will draw a line and say, we can't have our stations getting destroyed by this. And that's what would happen. I mean, I think let's be frank about it. The idea behind cutting off public media, when you hear people on the right talk about it, they're angry about national coverage from national shows. Yeah. But that's not what would actually be impacted by what the president is trying to do or what Congress is trying to do. And it's not, I think, the larger, better funded stations that serve major cities either. It's the small rural stations that will find themselves unable to cope with the loss of these funds. And so I think, if people in those parts of the country want to preserve their access to local media, then they need to get on the horn to their members of Congress and tell them that they depend on these stations and they don't want Congress to remove that funding. But on a national level, absent that kind of pushback, the broad right-wing critique of the media as fake news just makes this a very appealing target for them.
Does indeed.
We've seen a lot of on bended knee action by big media companies. Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post, CBS possibly. We don't know what's going to happen with Shai Redstone. She runs Paramount, and she's hoping to get a merger through, and it seems to be putting pressure on 60 Minutes and their news coverage. ABC News, as people probably know, they settled for $15 million with Donald Trump when George Stephanopoulos, a longtime reporter, used the word rape in the E. Jean Carroll case instead of sexual assault, because in New York State the law was different, that it would have been in Massachusetts where it would have been rape, but not there. Well, in any case, they got this money from ABC, Trump did, and he's going to spend a lot of, I guess, on his library. But here he had an interview with ABC with reporter Terry Moran, who questioned Trump on several aspects of his first 100 days of his second term. And here's how Trump treats ABC post that $15 million.
We had a president that was grossly incompetent. You knew it, I knew it, and everybody knew it, but you guys didn't want to write it because you're fake news. All right. Thank you. And by the way, ABC is one of the worst. I have to be honest with you.
And then I think he tells Moran he's not really sure who he was, or something.
He said that earlier.
Something like that. Is the capitulating, at least in ABC's case, seems not to be working. We'll see about what it didn't seem to go so well for the Washington Post either. What do you think?
Yeah. I think the major difference that we're seeing from Trump's first term to his second term is not what Trump is doing, but how major news outlets are responding. Yeah. After all, we saw the same level of vitriol, the same attacks on people who were interviewing him in the middle of the interviews during the first term, and we saw him try to use the power of his administration to force the parent companies of news outlets to get the news outlets in line. This happened when CNN's parent company was trying to put together a big merger that needed federal approval, and the federal government was holding it up, and CNN's parent company went to court and got the merger done rather than bending the knee. This time around, it seems like CBS is making a different decision. It was very clear that this issue was going to happen. As soon as CBS's parent company announced it was attempting a merger last July, it was obvious that if Donald Trump became president, he was going to try to use that as leverage in some way. And that is exactly what is happening. And the difference is Paramount seems to be willing to give Trump whatever he wants in order to get the merger done, even if that means forcing some sort of apology out of CBS News, putting money in Donald Trump's pocket in some way. There's still an opportunity for them to, straighten their spines. They would almost surely win this lawsuit that Trump has filed against CBS.
Yeah, but if they win the lawsuit and Shai Redstone doesn't make $500 million on the Skydance deal, which is apparently what's really behind this, no?
Yeah, that is... So Republicans have been attacking the media for a very long time. Donald Trump's innovation, though, the thing that he understands that previous Republicans did not, is that so many of these outlets are owned by people who have business before the government in some way. Either they're part of a corporate entity and therefore that corporation might have merger talks or some other sort of regulatory business, or they're owned by a private individual like the LA Times, the Washington Post, who might the force of government might be brought to bear on them in some other way.
I'm sorry.
even if the journalists want to do the right thing, they're trapped by the people who run Paramount, who don't necessarily care at all about journalistic ethics or anything like that.
Matt
they want to
Gertz,
make money.
We had Maria Ressa on yesterday, obviously won the Nobel Peace Prize, ran Rappler, and she wrote the book How to Stand Up to a Dictator, and she was talking about what Duterte, the autocrat there, who's now in jail, and tried to jail her unsuccessfully, did with the media. And then I go home and read your piece about Trump's war on the press, and the description you give of what the Attorney General, who thinks the election was stolen in 2020, by the way, is attempting to do to journalists who she considers to be, you can give us her definition, treasonous, is makes your blood run cold. Can you share that with people, please?
Yeah, so, we've seen a real uptick in these sorts of attacks on the press. The most recent one was that the Attorney General has decided to end the protections that journalists had from the federal government trying to force them to testify or turn over documents as part of leak investigations. The upshot of that is that anytime the president decides that he is angry about some sort of information that has gotten out in the press, he can get the Justice Department to try to find out who is leaking on him. They can go to the journalists that reported on the story and try to force them to give up the source. And most journalists aren't going to do that. If they refuse, they're going to end up going to jail. And so, even in the best of circumstances, this is a very dangerous power to wield against journalists. But the situation we have now is that the people that have been put in charge of the Justice Department, Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, the deputy head of the FBI, Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, these are not people with let's put it this way, not people with a strong sense of the rule of law. They are people who are in those positions, who have been selected very specifically because they are sycophantic supporters of the President of the United States and will do what he asks them to do, even if that means, shattering the rule of law in this country. You mentioned Duterte. Donald Trump is a big fan of his.
Yeah.
Also, Viktor Orban is someone that Donald Trump has said that he thinks of as a model for these sorts of authoritarian, autocratic moves. It's pretty unnerving that we're sort of out of examples of parallel cases in the United States to talk about. The ones that are the best are, foreign autocrats who crack down on the press in order to conceal their own corrupt doings.
We're speaking with Matt Gertz of Media Matters for America for our weekly media analysis segment, as we call it, Press Play. Matt, in your story about Trump's war on the press, I think as Jim said, he's going beyond refusing to, you report he's going beyond just not disclosing sources, but to reporting that damages the president's interests. I mean, I feel like we're doing reporting or at least commentary that may not be in line with the president's interest every day, and certainly every newspaper in America that's doing original reporting, you guys online and the Times and even the Post still, which has been under the thumb of Donald Trump, but the Wall Street Journal, they're all doing reporting that is opposed to the president's interests and policies. She's talking about being able to go after those people too.
Well, she's talking about going after people who are, it's the idea would be targeting the leakers who are disclosing information that is against the president's interests, which is going far beyond the previous standard was about classified information. You'd want to do leak investigations, but this is much broader, and we'll end up, if it's fully effectuated, pulling in a lot of reporters from a lot of different outlets, basically at the will of whether whether or not these partisans in the Justice Department want to do it.
And by the way, for those who are saying, well, we have nothing to worry about because the good guys, in quotes, are going to win, that's after you spend a ton of money, or a smaller media company that doesn't have the money has to decide what to do, the stress, the anxiety,
Or the reporters are in
fear.
jail
Exactly.
in the meantime.
So, but one of the things my co-host Marjorie here, Matt Gertz, said in the early days of Trump, we have judges on the show, former judges, attorneys general, and they all talk about constitutional crises. And Marjorie always says, I'm not convinced that the average person even knows, and she doesn't mean this disparagingly, what does a constitutional crisis even mean? And I'd apply it to this. Are you convinced that the average person knows when we talk about things like this, when Trump is attacking press freedom, et cetera, that translates into some reality rather than some abstract principle with the average American?
I think it's really hard to say. On the one hand, I saw a poll the other day that had over 50% agreement for the statement that Donald Trump is trying to be a dictator.
Yeah, we saw that, yeah.
Which I thought was quite high. At the same time, you also don't see, you see some amount of protest in the streets, but not what I would call like an overwhelming amount of it. And so, I think that part of this is going to depend on the elements of Trump's policies that do impact the average American on a day-to-day basis. It's going to be, whether Trump's tariffs end up causing a huge wave of unemployment and, general immiseration and impoverishment of a broad swath of the population that's going to drive his approvals down more. That said, I mean, he's already the most unpopular president after his first 100 days of anyone in the history of polling. So it does seem to be having some effect. It's hard to say how much of it.
Matt Gertz, I look at Media Matters every day because you report on what other alternative media is doing and places like what Fox News is doing, and Fox News is very powerful. But you guys at Media Matters talked about how we had these polls come out this week. Washington Post, ABC, New York Times, a bunch of places did polls, and the polls were all not very good for Trump. But you guys reported on how they were spinning those poll results in MAGA country. What were they doing?
Yeah, they were basically saying that the polls were fake in various different ways. And, that's not terribly surprising. You have to remember that the audience for all of these people are the dead enders, the people who will support Trump until the sky falls.
Yep.
And because of that, their incentive is always going to be to find some way to either spin a story in his favor or to not talk about it altogether. And so, Trump came out after all these polls started falling and said they're fake polls from fake news organizations and that those news organizations should be investigated. Yeah. And Fox News's pollster should be too. And, on the one hand, it's amusing because it's ridiculous to think that there would be some sort of legal basis for pursuing pollsters because the numbers are very mean and unfair to Donald Trump. On the other hand, he's suing Ann Seltzer, the big pollster from Iowa, because he says her poll that showed him not doing very well close to the end of the election was like some sort of effort to swing the election.
It had Harris winning, didn't it? By 3 or 4 points.
It had Harris winning. It was definitely it was not an accurate poll.
No, she was wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's a difference between being wrong and being having that wrong statement be legally actionable.
Exactly.
And so, he's suing her over that. She'll probably win, but as we've already established, these lawsuits can cost a ton of money.
Yes.
And they make other people nervous about what they can say in public as well. And so, I think the threats always seem ridiculous right up until the point when he goes ahead with them.
That's a wonderful point.
And so when we talk about Donald Trump making threats against the press, oftentimes he doesn't follow through with them. But we've seen him over the last few weeks issue executive orders explicitly targeting for federal criminal investigations two former members of his administration.
Yes.
As well, and then you add on to that the various executive orders targeting law firms. It would not take much effort at all for Trump to put out an executive order today that demanded the Justice Department look into whether pollsters for news organizations are somehow breaking the law. And that would force those pollsters and those news organizations to spend a bunch of money defending themselves. It doesn't cost Donald Trump anything. He's got, the Justice Department is totally under his thumb. They'll do whatever he says. He doesn't care if there are better things that they could be using their time on. He wants to target his enemies. He thinks media outlets are those enemies. And so at any time, he can pull the trigger on these sorts of tactics.
So before you go, Matt Gertz, we disgraced ourselves the other day by talking about the Bill Belichick situation here, even though we loved every minute of it. And I felt we got a reprieve the next day when a serious issue arose, namely Bill Belichick, supporter of Donald Trump, took a page out of the Trump playbook and said the media lied to him. The media edited an interview in a way that was intentionally unfair to him, et cetera. And while a lot of people still criticize us for talking about it, it seems to me that in that parallel universe where sports is everything and everybody knows Belichick and everybody knows about his girlfriend, him doing that Trump thing in terms of his book interview with CBS Sunday Morning has potential to spread the notion that the press is the enemy of the people. It is fake news. It is. Am I fooling myself, or is there some significance in his response?
Well, I think that interview was the most embarrassing thing to happen to Bill Belichick since he went 0-2 in the Super Bowl against Tom Coughlin and Eli Manning.
Okay.
But that aside, I think that other newsmakers have figured out that they can take that page out of Donald Trump's book, that Trump's effort to delegitimize the press has been very effective, especially among Republicans. And because of that, if you say that you have been victimized by the press, there's a huge chunk of people who are going to accept that on its face.
Matt Gertz, thank you very much for being
really
with us.
appreciate talking to you. Thanks for your work, too.
And thanks
it's great.
for the great work of Media Matters for America. It's a wonderful website. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks so much for having me.
See you soon.
We've been speaking with Matt Gertz of Media Matters for America for our weekly media analysis segment, Press Play. Up next, back by popular demand. We blew this off yesterday because Jim, for some reason, put the kibosh on it. But today we are back. F.I. the A-hole segment follows up. Okay, here's the question, Jim. How far would you go to get rid of a neighbor's lawn ornaments you think are in bad taste? And did one person go too far when they publicly shamed their neighbor's pink flamingos on the neighborhood Facebook group in an effort to sway neighbors' public opinion against the flamingo lady? Call or text next, 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Radio and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, President Trump once again threatens to strip Harvard of its tax-exempt status. We'll also hear what Trump's midnight executive order to pull funding from NPR and PBS could mean for public media outlets like GBH. And the administration is dismantling an agency focused on toxic chemicals and workplace hazards. It's all coming up at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Concerts West. Coming to TD Garden on September 17th, Hans Zimmer presents The World of Hans Zimmer, A New Dimension, an orchestral and cinematic experience. Tickets now available. More at worldofhanszimmer.com. And Lexus Broadway in Boston, presenting Kimberly Akimbo, the new musical by Boston native David Lanzia-Bear and composer Janine Tesori, May 6th to 18th at the Emerson Colonial Theater. More at lexusbroadwayinboston.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Mark Regan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. It is Friday. We are doing, admittedly a day late, Am I the A-hole today? And stop with the text blaming Marjorie. She apologized, and we're doing it today. And I forgive her, so it's fine.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome. So today's alleged real Reddit post involves someone who's been publicly shamed for their lawn flamingos. They're right that they recently bought a house, put a lot up, time into beautifying, at least what they consider to be beautifying the front yard, and bought 2 pink flamingos on sale at the garden store. A few days later, this neighbor knocks on the door demanding flamingos be removed because, quote, they're extremely gauche and lowering the property value of our neighborhood. This neighbor then proceeded to essentially dox the flamingo owner on the neighborhood Facebook group. Pictures of the house, I shouldn't laugh, the street, and a close-up of the flamingos. They don't live in an homeowners association. There are no town ordinances about yard flamingos. So who's the a-hole? The noisy neighbor who wants to maintain what she considers to be a proper image for her street without the tacky look of flamingos, or the individualistic gardener who is inspired by some budget decorations. And if you broaden it out to include those truly horrid inflatable holiday decorations that maybe stay up year-round, does your assessment change? Our number is 877-301-8970. Before we start, Marjorie.
Yes, Jim.
Little factoid I think will inform our audience.
Yes, Leominster.
Who is Don Featherstone?
Well, Don Featherstone is the gentleman who was born in Worcester, but he worked for years at Union Products, a maker of plastic lawn ornaments in Leominster, where he came up with the pink flamingo.
He invented the pink flamingo.
He invented it. That's right. He just died, actually.
Very
Don
sad.
Featherstone. We have a picture of him in his field of pink flamingos. But Michelle in Leominster says, I'm from Leominster, home of the pink flamingo lawn ornament invented by Mr. Featherstone at Union Products.
Wow.
Everyone in Leominster stands tall for the pink flamingo. The neighbor is definitely the a-hole.
So who do you think is the a-hole before we get to the calls? 877-301-8970.
Well, you know, if I was going to get into a spat with my neighbor, it wouldn't be over 2 lousy pink flamingos.
Wouldn't?
I mean, no, that's a little much. You might think they're tacky. Listen to this person, though.
So wait. So that means you think the a-hole is the complaining neighbor. Just suck it up. It's
I
two
do.
pink flamingos.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
There are other things you might complain about, but not 2 pink flamingos.
Okay, fine.
So listen to this one.
Yeah.
We had neighbors who moved in. First, they put a very noisy air conditioning unit right near our kitchen window.
problem.
There were other intrusions as well, like a motion light that shone into our window. We asked if they could angle it downward. They did not. Then they put a windsock in the yard near our front door, made so much noise.
Love windsocks.
One night, I grabbed the windsock and put it in the trunk of our car. So the next day, her husband would find it when he's putting groceries in the trunk and had about a nervous breakdown, and he wanted her to put it in the dumpster, but she'd get rid of the windsock. She just snatched it and shoved it in the trunk of the car.
Listen
Jim.
to Lucy from Worcester, the hometown of, what's his name?
Mr. Featherstone.
Okay,
Don Featherstone.
Listen to Lucy. Yeah, if someone did that to me, meaning I owned the house with the 2 pink flamingos, the flamingos would multiply faster than rabbits. You hate my flamingos? Well, here are 50 more for you to look at.
Yeah.
So that's sort of, I think, how I'd approach this thing, too.
You know
they are
what's-
tacky. I have to say.
They're very tacky.
Be careful here. We have some houses in the neighborhood in which I live, like a half a block away, in which usually by like October, there are inflatables of Santa Claus that are almost as big as this part of the library.
Yeah, I know. They blow them up. They fill them with air. Then they kind of collapse.
It's a little hard
sometimes.
to take, don't you think?
Yeah, sometimes people get very upset about those things. What I think is really tricky is if you live like in a a lot of condos have rules about what you can
Homeowners Association,
put.
yeah.
But if you live in like a 2 or 3 family house and somebody, has a Trump flag on the first floor and you're not a Trumpster, that can be a little bit dicey. Or you have some other kind of flag or public thing that's making some political statement that the neighbors don't like, that can cause some real problems, Jim.
You know, I like, you've told me a story about how your neighbors got one of those cars, took off the wheels and put them on cement blocks next to you in Brookline.
Oh, no.
How was that?
No.
Wasn't
That
it
was a
Brookline?
dear friend of mine. She rents out an Airbnb down in Rhode Island, and she does very well with it. And all of a sudden, this guy that collects scrap metal, scrap iron, that kind of stuff, moved in next door. And within about 4 days, the front yard was full of old refrigerators, the backyard was full of tires and pieces of rusted metal and all. She had a nervous breakdown because she was having the Airbnb.
So what'd you do about it?
She had to build that week like an 8-foot fence.
No.
So the people
Is that
the
really
Airbnb
true?
Well, you don't want to go on vacation and 4 feet away from you are insides of cars and all this like debris a scrap metal collector might collect. You know what I mean? You don't
So
want to
she's
live in
anti-scrap metal, is that what you're saying?
well, she's anti the scrap metal that's 3 feet from her guests in her Airbnb.
So we want to know who's the a-hole, the complainer about the pink flamingos or the purveyor of the pink flamingos? Who is the a-hole here at 877-301-8970?
Jeff from Newport. What do you think, Jeff?
Hello, Jeff.
Hi.
Hi.
I think the purveyor of the pink flamingos you have to have a little bit of leeway with that because it is summertime coming.
Good point.
However, I have a neighbor
Yeah.
who puts out Christmas balls and Christmas garlands on some of the bushes outside of the house that I also live in. It's an apartment dwelling. And I walked outside the other night after having 2 wonderful Manhattans, looked at them and said, these are Christmas balls, and I'm sick of looking at them.
Oh.
So I took them and I threw them in the trash and I went inside and I made another Manhattan.
You know how to
Wait a
live,
minute.
Jeff.
Wait a minute.
You are my kind of guy.
You threw them in the trash? You couldn't have given them back to the neighbor?
No, he did the right thing.
No, they were from the Dollar Tree.
Sure.
Okay.
Although the color had washed off, all it said was Noel.
Okay. You know, Christmas decorations can be very tricky.
You know how Maria Ressa said silence is complicity?
Yeah.
Jeff decided he
Took
wasn't
things
going to
in
be
his own
silent.
hand.
Took
Well,
things in his own hands. Beautiful,
Well,
Jeff.
Jeff,
Thank
as you said, after your third Manhattan, who knows what you would have done after you finished the number 3. Okay. Oh.
Here's an anonymous texter.
Yes.
A Supreme Court justice's wife went over and turned the flamingos upside down.
That's right. That is in reference to Mrs. Alito.
Mrs. Alito.
Martha Alito, who had the upside-down American flag flying. No, it wasn't an American flag. It was some Trump symbol flying in the yard.
Was it, or was that the second house, I think?
There was one, there might have been one American flag and one Trump symbol.
Yeah, one was a distress.
That means, that's when the flag's upside down. It means
okay.
distress.
All
But
right,
it was
fine.
some kind of
You're right.
boat or something like that.
Okay, here it goes. Anonymous. Flamingos are better than post-election Trump signs. Jesus, you won. It's May. Take them down already. I think that's a fair position to take.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to Donna in Lunenburg. Hi, Donna.
Hi.
Hey there.
Hey there.
So I'm first-time caller.
Wow.
I live right next door to Leominster.
You do?
Oh, there you go. The home of Don Featherstone, creator of the pink flamingo.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we know they're taxes.
What?
But we're proud about flamingos.
Yeah, so what's the deal up there in Leominster? Are there flamingos on every lawn? Are people supporting Mr. Featherstone, especially since he just passed away a few days ago?
A few days ago?
Absolutely.
He died on Monday at age 79.
Do you have flamingos?
Oh, sorry. Old story.
Do you have
He's been
flamingos?
dead for quite some time,
Well,
actually.
whatever, he's dead
He passed
nevertheless.
away 10 years
Donna,
ago.
do you have
Whoops.
flamingos in your
Whoops.
lawn or no?
I do.
You do?
The mayor of Leominster,
Yeah.
Mayor Razzarola,
Yeah, I know
he
him.
painted
Yeah.
pink crosswork.
He what?
Pink flamingos on the street.
He did?
The crosswalks are pink in Leominster.
That is fabulous. Can you do me a favor one more time to make my day?
Yeah.
Can you just say these words? The mayor of Leominster. Say them, Donna.
Oh, Mayor Mazzarella, the mayor of Leominster.
Donna,
got a
you
great
are
accent.
welcome any time on this show. That
Yeah.
was fabulous. Call us again and say hi to the mayor for us, Donna. There, Donna from Lunenburg right there. 877-301-8970. Dano and Dudley says, if some hag of a neighbor complained about 2 little flamingos, I would have to go out and buy the biggest inflatable ones I could find on Temu. Tariffs be damned.
That's a good one. Jim, here's one for you. I thought pink flamingos in your yard meant that you were a swinger. Am I wrong about that?
That's upside down pineapple,
Upside
but that's
down
close
pineapple.
enough.
Close enough, that's right. Amy from Somerville, thank you for calling.
Hello, Amy.
Hi, my name is Amy. I'm from Somerville.
That's why
and
we
I grew
called
up
you
in
Amy
Newton,
from Somerville.
actually.
But God, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I grew up in Newton on a very nice street where everyone thought they had the best taste. And my father, who was annoyed by all the people who thought they were better than everyone else, went to an old bodega that he worked next to, and they were giving away their lottery sign, and he put it on our front porch and had it flashing 24 hours a day. He mowed our lawn and spray painted it in different shapes, which really, got by the uptight architect who lived next to us very upset, but I felt like it was the best way to bring everybody's egos down. I'm ironically now married to an architect, but it was a lot of fun having that dialogue on my street all the time.
Boy, your father sounds like a great one.
It's a great street.
Amy, how old were you when your father?
Awesome.
How old were you when your father did this?
I was. I was probably 9. And no, my sister was 9. I was probably 12.
So were you embarrassed or were you loving it?
I was embarrassed by all of my dad's antics and rule-breaking things, and now I love them more than anything. I'm so proud of who he is.
Amy,
he actually gets along with everyone. So
that was another beautiful call, actually. Thank you very much. Anonymous texter said something. What's his name? Don Featherstone? He died exactly at the same time as Paul Weiss. When Paul Weiss died,
he died.
Right.
Yeah,
the same week, I think.
There's not the same person, right? There's one Paul, there's one Weiss, but they're both dead.
Oh, they're separate people?
I think so.
Okay.
I believe so. Why don't you check it out,
I'll
Jim?
check it out, yeah.
But Mr. Featherstone, according to the Boston
When did he
Globe,
die?
Well, he died back in June of 2015, Jim.
So it wasn't this week?
No, he's been dead for quite some time.
Yes. Yeah.
I thought he just passed.
But the flamingos live on.
The flamingos live. There's a beautiful picture
Do you
of him
ever done flamingos?
Standing in a field
hold
of
it up to
flamingos
the camera
in a Hawaiian shirt.
Can you see that thing there or
not?
not? No one cares
I
about
don't think
that.
anybody can see that. But anyway,
okay,
it's
so
a very colorful shirt.
Have you ever put a whatever you call it,
pink flamingo,
or anything like that? Any kind of quote decoration?
No,
there
no.
in the house
I go with the wreaths. I do the wreaths.
What a wreath?
Yeah,
well,
like
wreaths. No one objects to.
Yeah,
wreaths.
no one objects to.
No.
But there's an issue about how long you leave the wreaths up. Like some people, this is a big debate. How long do you leave your Christmas lights up?
I like that.
There are people on my street that leave the Christmas lights up until like Easter, which is unusual.
How long do you leave a pink flamingo up? That's
I think
the question.
that could be. It's a year-round operation.
Season.
Yeah, you can go out and shovel it out if it snows. Marilyn from Wellesley, what do you think?
Hi, Marilyn from Wellesley.
Yes, I have a friend that has had flamingos, 2 flamingos in her yard for at least, 10 years.
Yeah.
Every single holiday, and even ones that aren't holidays, she dresses it up. She dresses them up.
Yeah.
Oh!
Every sports event you could possibly think of, badminton, volleyball,
Love her.
baseball, golf.
Oh, that's great.
Tennis, kickball, and in the winter, they're all dressed up in shoveling snow. They're doing other things. I mean, the little kids love it, absolutely love it. They come by, they wait, they take pictures, all the neighborhood. So I hope it isn't anybody that in Arlington that's complaining, because her exhibit is absolutely a delight year-round to everyone.
Well, you know what that's like?
That's
It
like the
reminds me of
ducklings.
Nancy Shern, the brilliant Newton sculptor who created the ducklings.
All the ducklings down at
They dress
Boston
them up
Common.
all the time.
Celtics uniforms, Easter outfits, pilgrims at
You know what they also
Thanksgiving.
did as a political thing?
What?
When Trump was caging little kids in Trump won,
They put
them
ducks
in
in the cage.
Which is pretty incredible. Hey, that was great.
Listen
Thanks
to
for the
this.
call. What?
The famous flamingo lawsuit took place in Barrington, Rhode Island. It was a
was
legal
that?
battle between the town and a family over the placement of decorative flamingos on their property. The case centered on whether flamingos violated a municipal ordinance related to size, location, and number of decorative yard items. This was wild. They ended up having flamingos, like this person just said,
Wow.
they called, playing basketball and football,
Great
any kind of
story.
theme, until, unfortunately, they lost the suit, and then they moved.
Okay, now you live on a very nice street.
I do.
Okay, so if the next door neighbors were to put up a handful of pink flamingos, what would you consider doing?
Nothing.
Are you okay with that?
Yes, I am.
Because you respect their property rights or because you like pink flamingos?
I just can't get worked up about a bunch of pink
Flamingos?
I kind of like them, actually.
You do?
Yeah, they're sort of cheerful.
You like
make
plastic,
you feel Caribbean kind of
It's really
thing
nice.
going on. You feel like
It's a
you're
nice
down.
plasticky
Yeah,
feel.
nice
I
plasticky
think that.
feel. What would you do?
What would I do? I would do what all those Texas said. I get 100 of them. The next door, I wouldn't have them to begin with, but if I had them, I'd get 100. Anonymous says the flamingos are the a-holes. They're not native to Massachusetts. Deport them. So that obviously is something at least somebody would support.
Susie in Framingham, thank you
Suze.
for calling. Suze in Framingham, hi.
Hi.
Hey, it's Suze again.
Hi.
So nice to be back.
We're glad to have
calling.
Two things. One is I'm actually a real estate attorney. I can draft the most onerous homeowner agreements you ever want.
you. Yep.
I had a condition in my purchase and sale agreement that I didn't have to buy if there were any homeowner agreements, because I'm not letting anybody tell me what I can do with my property.
Whoa.
Wow.
I'm from the West. I have pink flamingos. I have some, a little dog, some other things that are artwork I bought up in Gloucester. And somebody was walking by when somebody was working in my yard, and the woman walking by complained about the decorations I had in my yard, to which she responded, when you start paying for a mortgage, you can have an opinion.
Wow.
Wow, you don't fool around.
They're tough there in Framingham. Are there a lot of flamingos in Framingham, I'm guessing, Suze?
I think I probably am the only one with them.
Oh. Well, listen, thank you for...
Bathtub Marys.
What's that?
We have bathtub Marys in Trump's sign.
Oh, that's great. Suze, thank you. Call us anytime. By the way, an anonymous texter says 2 bird segments in one show, defund NPR. It's actually a very good point.
I just want to get, I think my assessment
It's a pro-bird bias.
It's a pro-bird bias. My assessment of the texters is that we're about 8 to 2.
What side are they on?
The side of the flamingo person. They don't think.
Well, it is your property. Except, as I said a minute ago, if instead of flamingos, your friend, if the neighbor had scrap iron on the front yard, how would you feel about that?
Yeah. Well, that's the scrap iron is very upsetting because it's so ugly and it's rusted and it smells bad and
it's horrible.
Sometimes it's smoking or something.
It's smoking?
Well, I don't know if it's actually smoking. That may be
Smoking is incredible.
exaggeration.
You ever seen a pink flamingo smoke? That is is upsetting.
No, but scrap metal is not that attractive, I would think.
No, it's not.
Mike from open dishwashers, open
I understand what
washing
they
machines.
are. Yeah.
Mike from Providence. What do you think, Mike?
Hello, Mike from Providence.
Hi there. I've had the worst neighbors you could ever imagine.
Why?
And what I did to them is I put the brightest light possible all night facing their house.
That's great.
In revenge for all the crap they did to me.
What'd they do to you?
Homophobic, racist, threatened my life because I had a misfit psychopath that wanted to kill me.
Why'd you call the cops, Mike?
Oh, I did. And I got a couple people arrested, actually.
Well, that's a good thing, I guess.
Wow.
Well, yeah, it was terrible, but a good comeback is just swear and fight. And whoever you don't like, if they're harassing you,
Mike, we're losing you.
Yeah.
We're losing you. I think the comeback, we lost you. The light, you know what that reminds us of, which we have mentioned? When Tony Soprano's wife was a real estate agent. I hope I get this right. I'm going to get it closest to right. And the town or somebody was not giving her a permit or whatever she needed. He got a boat. He got opera. Am I right about this? I think so.
Opera music.
He got opera music, played it. It's like 6 million decibels right off the shore where the house was, and played it 24/7. And I think the guy ultimately capitulated.
He capitulated.
Yeah.
I think he capitulated rather quickly as soon as he found out who it was
Tony
in the boat.
found out it was
But
Soprano,
remember the story? There was a story in the Globe, I don't know, a while ago now, maybe 8 or 10 years ago,
What's
about
that?
this woman that bought this little cottage, and it was somewhere in the North Shore, and she bought it in like January. And
the view of the water?
Yes, and she looked out and she had a view of the water, and she was so excited because, a view of the water is pretty nice. You could look out her kitchen, she's washing the dishes and see the water. And then the season changes, and the person next door comes back, and they put this huge boat in the driveway, blocking her view of the water. And she's kind of disheartened, and she volunteers to pay for them to keep their boat in a marina so that she can get the view of the water. And they said, drop dead.
Wow.
Isn't that awful?
So do you know
sad ending.
do you know who the guy, you actually know him, do you know who the guy was who capitulated to Tony Soprano? Paul Weiss. Paul Weiss is the one who...
Paul Weiss.
By the way, if you haven't been listening to the show the last few weeks, you don't get that, but I can't help you.
We ran into the guy, Matt Shearer, yesterday.
He used to be our producer.
He used to be our producer. He's a big star now at another
BZ
radio
Radio.
station.
We're allowed to say it. BZ Radio. He's
and he
brilliant.
used to do our blooper reels. And every week I had a blooper reel.
You
I
did.
would like to say I've improved.
You have,
because
we don't know why.
I don't have enough material for a blooper reel every week. I did then, where every week I get the number wrong, I get your name wrong, I get something wrong, call letters wrong. So things are improving, Jim. I'm not as bad
Why'd
as
you
I
bring
used to
that
be.
up, by the way?
Because I just made a mistake.
What'd you make?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Oh, Paul Weiss.
Paul Weiss.
That was a month and a half ago.
Paul Weiss. Oh, Paul Weiss was
There's two
the
people.
first law firm that capitulated to
Yeah.
Donald Trump. And I assumed that Paul Weiss was an actual person.
And alive.
His name was Paul and Weiss. But in fact,
He was two people and he was
two
dead.
People, they're both dead.
Yeah.
That's right. So
Okay.
anyway, I will not make that mistake again. Jake from Wayfield, thank you for calling.
I wouldn't say that's clear. Go ahead. Hi, Jake.
Hi,
What's
how's
your
it
deal?
going?
Good. We're excellent. Thank you.
I think that the complainer is the a-hole. I think it's obvious that that's an entitled attitude. And it actually reminds me of something that happened when I was growing up. A guy on my street painted his house like lime green.
Yeah.
And my mom got all the neighbors together and bullied him into painting his house another color.
Oh, my God.
Oh, no.
And I still tell my mom that was a gross, yucky, nasty thing to do and very selfish. And her concern was, the value of the houses on the street were going to go down because this guy's house was green. That just feels like an asinine thing to say. I mean, people are murdering one another to get a shack these days. So, that's not really going to hurt your house price.
How you get along with your mom?
She's a nice lady, but we do disagree on a lot of things.
On green in particular, yeah. What else? I'm just curious.
Or just like, people can do what they want with their property, and if you don't like it, don't look at it, and that's too bad.
Well, you have a very healthy attitude, I would
Colors
argue.
of houses.
Jake, thank you for
very,
the call.
Very controversial.
Very controversial.
Especially if you live in a neighborhood with a lot of big old houses.
Big old
and
houses.
somebody paints their house an unusual color.
Like what?
Well,
Like
it's
green.
like lime green.
Lime green.
Or bright orange.
Bright orange.
Or bright yellow. That can cause some consternation
Wow.
among the neighbors. And here's one that would drive me a little nuts,
What's that,
I must
please?
admit.
Please.
Well, this person says that they have a lovely backyard, and they had these next door neighbors who moved in just a little while ago, and they store all their junk in the open backyard.
That's
so it's
bad.
another case with the open refrigerators and the dishwashers that are broken, and all these old bicycles and blah blah blah. That's kind of tough. It looks like a junkyard, and they have a beautiful backyard, and they have to look at the junk all spring, summer, and fall. That would drive me nuts.
I'm reading, so you want to take a call?
Okay, let's go to Kelly in Melrose. Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
Hey, up in Melrose, we have a completely different attitude
What is it?
about the
Flamingos?
flamingos.
Yeah, what's your attitude?
So we do a fundraiser for the schools where you pay a certain amount of money and give them an address of, say, a friend or a coworker in Melrose, and a group sneaks a whole bunch of flamingos onto the lawn, and it's called flocking.
Oh.
So we love driving around and seeing, a whole flock of these on someone's lawn.
That is excellent. So Melrose is like a wild place, obviously, yes?
Oh, we are so wild.
Apparently. That is terrific. Hey, that's a great story, Kelly. Thanks for sharing that. Here's an anonymous texter if you want to hear this, Marjorie. I live in a smallish 35 homes neighborhood on the Cape. Years ago, someone put a flamingo on their property. Another neighbor complained. In no time, every house in the neighborhood had pink flamingos.
I love that.
Well, what is
I love
exactly the
that.
point of that story? Is that solidarity with the flamingo neighbor, or what is it?
Exactly. That's exactly what that is. And Barry in Belmont says Southwest Harbor, Maine has an annual flamenco parade and
Does?
festival. Did you know that?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Another wild
and here we
community.
go. We have some corrections on The Soprano.
What is it?
On The Soprano story about Tony Soprano riding
close
around the
enough.
boat, blasting music. It wasn't opera. It was Dean Martin live in Vegas.
I think that's
totally
true.
obnoxious.
I think
It was
you're right.
because the guy wouldn't give back the deposit Tony's
Oh, it's
wife
close
made
enough.
on the house, or Tony made on the house he bought for Carmela on the Jersey shore. So that was it. He
Well, that
wouldn't
was, I got the gist
Yeah,
of
it was close enough.
Okay,
Close enough.
Thank you for the correction.
877-301-8970 is the phone number. We should reintroduce the topic, Jim.
No, we shouldn't.
Yes, we
There's
should.
1 minute left.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah, the
Oh,
show
forget
ends.
it.
Let me tell you
Show
how this
ends.
starts.
Oops,
We get
okay.
here like
Yep,
11.
okay.
Then Henry does the news. We
Yep.
start.
I get so wrapped
And then
up,
at like
Jim.
1:56, you talk about Paul Weiss.
Yep.
And then we end the show. That's how every day pretty
Okay, we
much
have time
goes.
for another call.
One more call,
Samantha
quickly.
in Dedham. Thank you for calling,
Hi,
Samantha in
Samantha.
Dedham. Hi.
Hi. Well, my neighbor arranged to trim my tree,
Yeah.
and she over-trimmed it. I went to Italy. I came back. My tree was halved, and removed another tree.
What?
So she went. Well, yes, she cut out another tree and ruined the other tree on my property. So she went to Italy. I took a pink toilet, a vintage pink toilet, made a fountain, an illuminated fountain, and put it right where the tree was next to her driveway that she cut off.
I love this woman.
So my revenge was I sent a photo. I sent a photo to you by email.
Oh, you did?
Eliminated toilet. Yep.
Hey, Samantha, that is a fabulous story. You know what that's analogous to? Halloween several years ago, Marjorie's prior neighbors did what, Marjorie?
Carved all my kids' Halloween pumpkins. We came
Without
home
permission.
Halloween afternoon. They were all cut up.
Samantha, thanks.
This is a little bit different. There's a very famous television personality who was having an affair with a man who was married.
You can say who it is. It was in the Washington Post. Laura Ingraham.
Okay, Laura Ingraham.
It was in the Washington Post.
And the family goes away on vacation. What'd you do, Jim?
She stuck the water hose from the guy's yard through the mail slot in his door. And so the water was...
Just 3 feet of water in the house. Wow.
I'm not on board with that.
So you're like the last person alive who would approve of a pink flamingo. Is that a safe assumption? Obviously. I mean, look at Jared. Jared doesn't want to seem effete and elite, but I mean, you'd go nuts.
I do kind of love pink flamingos.
No, you don't.
Yes, I
That is
do.
a total lie. Who invented the pink flamingo?
I can't remember his name, but I know it was in Leominster.
I can tell you, Paul Weiss is his name.
It's not,
Paul
it's not Weiss. It's Don Featherstone.
Oh, I'm
He is
sorry,
no
Don
longer,
Featherstone.
He is no longer with us.
Is it really Featherstone?
Yeah, Featherstone.
That's interesting.
Oh, actually, that is it. How come we didn't pick up on that? That's a very good point.
Because flamingos, the plastic ones,
What are you
don't have
putting
any
away, the
feathers,
salt
so-
and pepper? The
I'm putting
show's
away the
not
salt and
over.
pepper, okay.
Can you wait 1 minute?
Okay, well, the news, the crew is coming in
Well,
here.
fine. So
I always
what
delay
is
the
it?
culture
It's a
show,
takeover
and
show.
I always delay them because I have so much stuff here.
What is your
What's
thing
on the
there?
culture show, Jared?
So we're going to be talking about the Bill Belichick interview. We're going to be you're talking
I
about,
don't know about that.
and
What
the-
happened?
Yeah, well, we'll talk about it on the show. And the other raging debate in America. Do you have a theory on this? 100 men versus one gorilla?
What is that sick or something? That sounds really sick to me.
Well,
do they punch out? They hurt the gorilla?
Oh,
well,
no.
that's how you're thinking.
No,
that's not at
hard.
all how I'm
I
thinking.
don't like that at all. You think the gorilla's going to do the 100 men?
I think they all run away, so the gorilla wins.
Oh, okay.
I hope they all run
I
away
hope
so the
so.
gorilla wins.
Okay, go
How
ahead.
about how much property she bought, the girlfriend? $9 million.
$9 million.
She bought $9 million worth
And
of
it's all
property.
mortgage free.
All throughout
I
Massachusetts.
don't think she has a job at the moment, does she?
This is Jordan, not the gorilla.
Well,
by the way.
This is
well,
George.
she told UNC that she was the head of Bill Belichick Enterprises.
Oh, okay.
or something to
Wow.
that
Okay,
effect.
what else is on the show?
And then we're going to talk about the Tony nominations and the the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Those two big
inductees this
stars
week.
from Othello or whatever didn't get any
Jake
nominations.
Gyllenhaal and Denzel Washington.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
That
Okay,
is a
see you
big
later.
deal.
Okay, bye. Nice to
Okay.
see you.
Thank you.
That was Jared Bowen, by the way. I
Jared
don't know
Bowen,
if you
who
know that.
wouldn't have a flamingo on his front lawn. Well, maybe he
Never.
would. We don't
No,
know.
he
He's
would
a man
not.
of mystery.
Don't be a
He
fool.
might have done it.
No.
Thanks for listening to another edition of
Man of
Boston Public
mystery.
Radio.
You know
Thanks
his
everyone who
closest
came
friend
down
is?
to the Boston
Paul Weiss.
Public
That's true.
Library.
Thank you very much.
Paul Weiss. We're getting tired of Paul
No,
Weiss.
we're not. Oh, we are not
Okay.
close to tired of Paul
Okay,
Weiss.
someone
No.
who's performed a few times. Oops, is that right?
Nope.
No, I'm on the wrong page. Yes, I am.
Okay, good.
It's part of Music Inclusion Ensemble. Oh, Galen Lee has a new album out today. It's called
She's back?
Music from Macbeth, her new concept album based on
great.
the original music she created for the Broadway run of Macbeth and Daniel Craig in 2022. It's available wherever you get your music. We've had her on, Jim.
We have, many a
yes.
time.
Okay, we have a podcast. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of the podcast.
Oh,
If
you were
haven't
telling
enough.
people to search for that.
Yes, I was.
Oh, that's good. She is
Yes,
brilliant.
she's
Check
great.
it out. Gail Lee.
On Monday, we're going to be joined by NBC Sports bosses Tony Casey, comedian W. Kamau Bell, ahead of a show at the Wilbur Theater. He is a riot.
He's fabulous.
GBH's Jennifer McKim on some shady practices in local solar panel installations, and CNN's John King. I want to thank the crew: Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, John LaClaw Parker, Jenny Bologna, Maddie Guy, Patrick Lally, Matthew Glover, Antonio Oliard, Juan Jose Cadena, folks at the Newsfeed Cafe, and across the street at the Lennox Hotel. The Culture Show with Jared Bowen starts immediately after we do. I am Marjorie Egan.
I am Jim Browdy.
Thanks again for tuning in today. Hope you can tune in tomorrow.
Thank
It's
you all
gorgeous
for
out. I
coming.
hope you
We
have a great
appreciate it.
afternoon.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our program